नौमि चित्प्रतिभां देवीं परं भैरवयोगिनीं मातर्मानप्रमेयं शशूलाम्बूजकृतास्पदाम्. Salutations to that goddess who is pure consciousness, who is the self-reflexivity of consciousness, reposing in its own innate beauty. Salutations to that flash of insight whereby Shiva recognizes himself. Salutations to that goddess who is always in sexual union with Bhairava. That goddess who in each and every moment and movement is manifesting herself as the trinity of knower, knowing, known, pramatar, pramana, prameyam. Salutations to that goddess who is mounted atop the trident, upon the lotus, in the Shushumna Nadi. Salutations to that goddess who is the mother of all. Om Naumi Devim Sharirastham Nrityato Bhairavakrite Pravirin Megha Ghanna Vyoma Vidyulekha Vilasinim. Salutations to that goddess Kundalini who abides in this body, who resides in the body of the dancing Shiva. She is playful and beautiful like a streak of lightning flashing across the monsoon season sky. May this be an offering at her lotus feet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Gurubhyo Namaha. Ganeshaya Namaha. So, last week, as you know, was Kālī Pūjā. And of course, a very significant Kālī Pūjā because every Amavasya, every new moon is a special time to worship Mother Kali. And often we say, there's Halloween once a year, but for I think some people, every day is Halloween. If you have a particular spooky kind of vibe, then Halloween starts in September at the very latest. Otherwise, it's all year round, you know. I imagine it's like the Nightmare Before Christmas or something like that. It's always Halloween until you decide to do Christmas or something. So in that same sense, hello Dakini Devi, Crystal is there, Jaima Jaima. So in that same sense, for worshippers of Mother Kali, they're always in that bhav, that new moon bhav, that feeling of being in the cremation ground in the darkest night of the month, worshipping the fierce aspects of one's own psyche to reclaim that power, all of that. That's year long and that's month long. But there's something about the Amavasya. It's when Kali Bhaktas really come alive. It's when Mother Kali feels most palpably present. So as you know, the new moon is especially sacred for Mother Kali, and we worship her with a special fervor every month during the new moon, the Amavasya. So every month there is Kālī Pūjā. Technically every day there's Kālī Pūjā. On Tuesdays and Saturdays especially, which are days sacred to Mother Kali, there's Kālī Pūjā. So if your Ishta is Mother Kali, like if you were given a Kali mantra as part of like your involvement in some kind of tantric lineage, and your main deity of worship, your main ideal is Kali, then yes, obviously every day is Kālī Pūjā. You're doing Kālī Pūjā day in, day out. But it's on Tuesday, it's on Saturday, and it's on the new moon that you are especially invited to do Kālī Pūjā. And as you know, of the various new moons in the Vedic calendar year, 3 of them are especially important for Mother Kali. For traditional reasons, for astrological reasons, for reasons we don't need to go into right now. The first in the sense of the Gregorian calendar year, is the Ratanti Kālī Pūjā in the month of Paśu, right before the Shivaratri. So Ratanti Kālī Pūjā. Then sometime in summer, like May, June, July, like that, by the Gregorian calendar, there's Phalaharani Kālī Pūjā, which is actually very significant in our lineage, because those of us who are in the lineage of Sri Ramakrishna, that was the Amavasya, that was the new moon, when Sri Ramakrishna worshipped his wife, Holy Mother, in the Kaula Yaga, in a very important culminating sadhana, where one worships the goddess in the living, breathing human body. So that's a very important moment. Of course, this is what arguably like Crowley is appropriating when he's doing the Scarlet Woman kind of thing. You know, like this is where the idea comes from, arguably. It comes from one of the most important Kaula rituals, if not the most important Kaula rituals, which is chapter 29 of Abhinavagupta's Tantra Loka, where it's all about worshipping the goddess, but not as some abstract, like, deity who is in the sky or who is like a concept, but like in the living, breathing form of the person before you. So to worship God in a woman is what it means to do goddess worship, to see the goddess fully manifest in a living, breathing woman and to recognize her there and worship her there. That's like obviously the ideal of the tradition. So that's what happened during the Phalaharani Kālī Pūjā. It's a very important day for us. It was also the last time Sri Ramakrishna, our Parameshti Guru, performed any formal sadhana. So when he finished this worship of Holy Mother, his wife, he laid at her feet his japa mala, representing 12 long years of intense sadhana, intense japa practice, intense like austerity. Like he put all of that at her feet and surrendered it. So that was the official ending of his sadhana, you could say. He never again, after that moment, took up any formal or structured kind of sadhana. He was complete, arguably, once he was able to recognize the Divine Mother in her immanence, in and through all things, especially in the form of his own wife. So that's important, the Phalaharani Kālī Pūjā. And there's a beautiful mantra, for offering japa. It goes like, Guyati Guya Goptri Tvam Grihana Smat Kritam Japam Siddhir Bhavatu Me Devi Tvat Prasadan Maheshwari. And the male deity version would be, you just change Goptri to Gopta and Maheshwari to Maheshwara, like that. So the verse says, you, Mother Goptri, are the protectress of all the secrets, of the supreme secrets. Guyati, Guya Ati Guya Goptri Tvam. You are the protector of the secrets. In fact, you yourself are the secret. So the mantra that you receive as part of your initiation is a secret, actually. It's something that maybe is whispered only to you in your left ear, and it's not something to be shared. It's secret in the sense that it's sacred, and it contains within it immense power. It's like a bija, a seed, which when planted will bloom into the full blossom of enlightenment. But that bija is so powerful, so sacred, that often it's guarded with a bit of secrecy. Like when you're intimate with your partner, like you don't just tell everybody about that unless you're into that. But like actually that intimacy is conducive to power, to closeness, if you will. So because we're so intimate with Mother Kali, because we're so intimate with the mantra is secret. But what is the mantra? Or to be more specific, what is the vidya? It's none other than that deity to whom it is ascribed. So the Kali Vidya, the mantra of Mother Kali, is Kali. So you, Mother, are the protectress of secrets, but you yourself are the secret which is being protected. Guyati Guya Goptri Tvam. Grihana means take. Grihana Smatkritam Japam. Of course, in the Chod sense, you can imagine the practitioner in the smashan saying, come, hungry spirits, drink this blood, eat this flesh. In Sanskrit, that mantra would be grihana, imam, take this mamsa, this meat, drink this blood, rudira, drink this rakta. And the word grihana means take. It's a very immediate word, it's like ma, take. So grihana smatkritam japam. Please take my japa, which means my repetition of your name. You who are the secret of the mantra, you who are the protectress of the secret, please take this repetition of thy name. Grihana imam. Guyati Guya Goptritam, Grihana Smatkritam Japam, Siddhir Bhavatu Me Devi. And of course, the word Siddhi is something that we can talk about, like what exactly that means. That will change from tradition to tradition. Generally, the left leaning, more Vamachara, more Kaula orientation would be like Siddhi means empowerment on every level of your being. So Rudira Priya just now was joking about, like, be careful, don't give me too much power. It's like, Devi, you are power. Like, you are the one who in people who have power flows as power. So that Shakti, the whole worship of Shakti is the worship of power actually, but power on every level of being, which arguably is stratified. You can even argue it's hierarchical. Physical power is one thing and it's worth having. Psychological power is another thing. The endurance that helps you like make it through difficult times, or just a generally cheerful disposition. That's a kind of Shakti actually. Enthusiasm, having high morale, all of that has to do with Shakti. So Shakti, that power to not be depressed. Even Abhinavagupta would say, that one of the greatest siddhis you can have is to be perpetually joyful. You who are the child of the Divine Mother, who is herself pervaded by bliss. So like that idea of bliss power, Shakti, psychological power, but also just the whole range of occult power, siddhis, Just like we would develop our intellect and be able to memorize more, or to be able to like understand more, just like that when we develop ourselves spiritually, we might find that we have clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc. Various things we might be able to see more of this world than was previously available to us. Actually, I do intend to go into some of that in today's lecture because I want to talk about the mystical parts of Kali Puja. In any case, there are all these things that come up as a result of sadhana. These are powers. And so empowerment is obviously going to be the effect of the worship of power. We're worshiping Shakti, the goddess, who is the personification of power. Of course, you'll become powerful. The word siddhi means power, magic, perfection, etc. And so we're asking for this. We're saying, Siddhir bhavatu me devi. Oh, mother, make me perfect. But of course, the highest goal we have in mind is union with the Divine Mother, to be able to see her standing there with her long black hair, to lead us into that ultimate realization from which maybe there is no return, or after which nothing is worth attaining. So that highest realization of the Divine Mother, that union, that yoga, if you will, that samadhi, if you want to call it that, that's our goal, and that's also a siddhi, an empowerment. So, Siddhir Bhavatu Me Devi, Tvat Prasadan Maheshwari, by your grace it is possible. So one can imagine that Sri Ramakrishna might have said that prayer, or intoned that mantra as he placed his japa mala, his rosary, at the feet of the Divine Mother Kali. And from that moment on, he was perfected. So that's the Palaharani Kali Puja. Now, the final Kali Puja of the year, using final in the sense of the Gregorian calendar year, is the Śyåma Kālī Pūjā. By Western Hellenistic astrology, this happens during Scorpio season. Right? So usually when there's like a scorpionic energy of sex, death, and transformation, a darker, edgier energy, this is when we worship Ma in her Śyåma form, her black form, or her dark form. Of course, in Vedic astrology, it's the month of Libra, Tula it's called. So Tula Rashi, the sun in Tula Rashi, and the Amavasya of Kartik, the new moon of the month known as Kartik or Ashwin, or depending on what calendar you're following. But that new moon in the solar house of Tula, which corresponds to like October, November, that's called Śyåma Kālī Pūjā. And that's the one we just celebrated together. Of the three, it's my favorite for obvious reasons. And I want to talk a little bit about what we did last week because we had Kali Puja. Many of you were here in person. It was wonderful to see Tarani Devi and wonderful to see Rudra Priya and have you all come and worship with me in person. That was really something. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, you're always invited. I would love to have you in this space and worship together because there's nothing like it. There's something about being at the altar in physical space that arguably cannot be replicated on Zoom, although we're grateful for Zoom in any case because still something comes across. There is still some sense, some presence. As the Christ pointed out, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also. So even if we're gathered in his name on Zoom, of course, he's also there. But there's something about being in the room together. And so it was really wonderful to be able to do that together. But like a lot of stuff happened. And it's something that we maybe ought to unpack. So in tonight's talk, I want to maybe explore a few elements I think that are distinctive in Kali Puja. So things that make Kali Puja distinctively Kali Puja. And I have in mind things like the Bhuta worship, the worship of ghosts and spirits, because so much of Kali Puja has the cremation ground ethos. Ideally, it's a puja that's performed in the cremation ground. And those of you who are here, we made it a point to regularly visit the smashan and sit all night and meditate there until the sun came up. And you felt in the like small hours of the night when you were sitting in the smashan, which, in an American context is just like a cemetery. That will do actually. But you felt hopefully, some presence that is palpable there and also kind of edgy. When one walks into that place, it can merely be for like a goth aesthetic or whatever. But then very soon you discover that it's no joke. Whether it's an open air funeral pyre like situation like Harishchandra Ghat or Manikarnika Ghat, or even a manicured lawn like setting in one of these American cemeteries. In either case, smashan is a smashan, crossroads are crossroads. And those energies of Bhairava and Kali, they thrive in liminal spaces like that, at crossroads, at the smashan. Just the other day, I was sitting at one of my favorite cafes in Hollywood, and it just occurred to me the only cafes I really spend time in are the ones that are at crossroads. And I thought that was an interesting observation. I unconsciously just gravitated towards cafes that are at crossroads. Naturally, when you start worshiping Mother Kali or Bhairava or this particular expression of God, it's going to bring you into such places. So, because such places are full of liminal entities, spirits, if you will, bhutas, pretas, etc., but also many non-human entities, pisachas, rakshasas, you can name them. Of course, there's a very big taxonomy of these types of beings that we can explore on another occasion. Maybe next week for Halloween, we can talk about like the demonology of Tantra or like the taxonomy of spirits. That's actually kind of helpful. And I am doing a talk soon actually at an Ayurvedic institute. A friend of mine is an Ayurvedic physician, but particularly in Ayurvedic psychiatry. And as you know, in Ayurveda, in the traditional understanding of mental illness, a lot of that has to do with spirit possession. So in order to like cure someone of spirit possession, we talk about like various exorcisms, remedies, things like that. So understanding the taxonomy of spirits can be very important. It's just a different way to think about things, a different modality for understanding the psyche and mental illness, if you will. So when you go to the smashan, it's very easy to be destabilized because, to speak in these terms, these spirits like live there and they are sometimes quite hostile to people who come and just sit there all night. They can disturb a person. So I want to talk about that a little bit. The element of Bhuta Puja, the worship of ghosts and spirits. That's an important part of Kali Puja. Next, the worship of jackals. The name for jackals in Sanskrit is Shiva, actually, which is interesting. Shiva being the feminine form, and it's the female jackals that are especially sacred in our tradition because they are symbols of Mother Kali. So naturally, from a more like, I'm going to use the word shamanistic, but of course, I don't mean that in the pejorative sense. Maybe the word autochthonous is better. From that point of view, like omens are very important. So if you see a certain animal, that indicates that the presence of a certain energy is available. So for instance, if one were to see like crows or something, the very presence of a crow in a symbolically charged moment, in a ritually charged space, would be important. I mean, maybe at any other time, the crow would just be a crow. It'd just be like, oh, look, a crow. I live in a place where there are many crows, so here's a crow. Like that could be the case. But if, you're in a particular state of mind, particular crow at a particular time might carry with it a particular symbolic significance. And of course, how do we distinguish this from magical thinking? Like that's something worth talking about too. And that's why, like last time's talk, not last week because last week was Kali Puja, but the week before that, we talked about how to stay safe, how to stay grounded and oriented, as it were, in the somewhat discombobulating, disturbing, mystical, shamanic world of Kali. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how this is different from magical thinking later. But for now, we have to recognize the importance of symbols like the jackal, like the crow, or like various other things that you might encounter in the course of your sadhana. So these things are to be paid attention to. The language of dreams is the language of symbol, and this particular kind of sadhana that we're doing, it's an Ida Nadi oriented sadhana. Vamachara actually, in one sense, just means the energies of the Ida Nadi. It means the interior path of the mystic. So it's not something that you can kind of subject to logic or reasoning in the traditional sense of those words. Like logic is important, reasoning is very important. These are very grounding things that have more to do with the Pingala or the solar channel. But these sadhanas, these tend to like I don't know, almost disrupt those logical ways of approaching things. In one sense, a dear friend of ours, he was before my time, I never met him, but a very powerful and important teacher here in this corner of the globe, also a Malayali like me, before I came to this country. He was teaching Tantra also from the same kind of background that I grew up in. And he would describe the image of Mother Kali as the triumph of the subconscious dreamlike mind over the conscious mind. So Lord Shiva, representing the masculine, logical, structured mind, has surrendered to some greater force, some greater energy, some symbolic power that is beyond the mind, that arguably lays waste to the structures of the mind. So that destructive force, when properly harnessed and channeled, in other words, when given a ground to dance upon, triumphs over the logical mind. So a stable, structured, logical mind is necessary, but up to a point. Soon that will be left behind. And then one experiences that which words can never describe. So that Kali, who is the subconscious mind, the realm of dreams and symbols, that will explode upon one's conscious, mundane experience, which is exactly the kind of thing that was happening for some of you who came and visited and worshipped with me in person. And I want to talk about, these things are, of course, kind of hard to talk about because they're mystical. And again, mystical experiences, the reason we don't talk about them is not because we can't or shouldn't. There's something to that, but also because we can't. Like, what will the logical mind be able to understand of it? The logical mind very quickly poo-poos anything that is put in symbolic or mystical terms. It's not used to thinking elliptically and symbolically in this way. Yet, those of you who are worshiping, you saw what you saw, you felt what you felt, and kind of unpacking that a little bit together is my purpose tonight. So, yeah, this idea of Kali being in the realm of dreams and symbol, necessarily then dreams and symbols are very important. There's Tarama, Jaima, Jaima, good to see you, Ma. Tarama is having like a little disco situation there. Look at this. Ma's party. Wow, there comes Bhairav Baba. Ma Tara, Kali with her black dog. So this idea of like totems, I guess you could say, totems or omens or symbols, all of these things are very, very important in the context of a more mystical, more devotional, more Ida Nadi, Vama Nadi kind of oriented sadhana. So we'll talk about that, of course, the role of jackals and the jackal puja. Essentially, I'm going to put some mantras in front of you from the Parati that highlight these sections, these distinctive elements of Kali Puja, like Bhuta Puja, like Jackal Puja. Of course, there are some other elements too, like we've spoken about Panchamakaras quite extensively in different places. Now, Panchamakaras are, of course, very important in Kali Puja. And there are many ways to substitute the Panchamakaras if indeed your guru or you have come to the conclusion that the use of Panchamakaras is not actually spiritually sustainable for you. But of course, there are mantras that we use in order to offer Mother Kali these 5 forbidden items. So just, you know what the Panchamakaras are. There are actually 3 of them mentioned in Abhinavagupta's Tantra Loka, like in chapter 29. It's like the 3 M's, actually. So that would be like meat, fish, and wine. So these 3 things are, of course, incredibly transgressive for brahmanas, for a certain section of society who are involved in spiritual practice. So you could say that like a brahmana might never touch meat or eat fish or like even sniff wine. And yet these things are offered to the goddess and then also maybe ritually consumed as prasad. So the 3 M's. But then you add the other 2, and then you get, of course, the drugs and the sex. So drugs also, you can understand that to be a kind of aphrodisiacal, like parched grain or something. It's a bit murky as to what mudra really means. The word just implies delight. So arguably it's some psychoactive substance, some stimulant or something. And then, of course, you have maituna, which is the climax, pardon the pun, of Abhinavagupta's Kaula Yaga Padati, right? So the goal of recognizing Shakti and feeling oneself to be Shiva and then entering into a metaphorical symbolic union in order to experience the samadhi of Shiva and Shakti. Like that ritual, that role, that the two partners, the consorts, play in the context of that puja is facilitated, as it were, or contextualized by the Panchamakaras. So there are mantras for that necessarily in the Padati, and we'll talk about the Panchamakaras, but of course, an even more disturbing in the sense of like edgy and transgressive element in Kali Puja is Bali. And of course, we did that here symbolically over the course of the worship, where we offered the vegetables. But again, as you know, in the Hindu world, like in the Vedic world, I should say, not just the Hindu world, because this would apply to the Buddhists and the Jains too, like plants have souls, plants are jivas. And so when you sacrifice a cucumber or something, don't think you aren't doing a bali. The question of why a buffalo bali or a goat bali is somewhat more significant than a vegetable bali is worth asking, actually, because bali is bali, sacrifice is sacrifice. And this is maybe one of the more problematic, if I may say so, elements of Kali Puja, especially for a Western audience, and arguably for a modern audience. For a modern audience that's very far removed from like the ancient ways of, I don't want to say pastoral or tribal or jungle or autochthonous, because these ways of worship were also present in highly urbanized societies like ancient Judaic culture, and of course all over the world, like Mesopotamian, Babylonian culture, Assyrian culture. Like these are cities, urban cities with bookkeeping and records and receipts and very complex legal systems, and yet the practice of bali, animal sacrifice at the sacrificial altar, was central to many of their rituals. Of course, Rome, being a highly urbanized and urbanizing influence, also participated in a lot of animal sacrifice. And arguably the early Christians, in the first 300 years of Christianity, they were vegetarians, according to some scholars, because they didn't want to eat the meat that was sold in the marketplace, because a lot of that meat was offered to the emperor. In the cult of the emperor, it was like sacrificed, for instance. So they didn't want to consume the prasad of what they felt was a pagan tradition. So in any case, Bali, the sacrifice of animals, that's not unique to Kali Puja. That's present in many, many autochthonous, and by that I mean tribal or shamanic or pastoral settings. But it's not just that. I think it's kind of important to point out that in highly urbanized, and I would even argue urbanizing civilizations like Rome, like Mesopotamia, like Babylon, like Assyria, and of course like the Judaic kingdoms of Judea and whatnot, like in all of these very urban and urbanizing places, you still saw animal sacrifice as being a major part of their rituals. So what would otherwise be a kind of universally understood and universally applicable practice is perhaps now really, like, of course, challenging and disturbing for people to like think about. So, for instance, Sister Nivedita, she's Irish. She's Irish Catholic. She grew up in a Western environment, and of course, they're eating meat. So she followed Swami Vivekananda to India, to Kolkata, and there, of course, you see a lot of Bali. If you go to Kalighat, the temple of Mother Kali in Kolkata, which is one of the most ancient temples in that part of the world for Mother Kali, or at least it's the temple that Kolkata is based on. Kolkata used to be called Calicut. Calicut was the British name for that place, but Calicut means Kalighat. Kalighat is the name of the temple. Right. So Kalighat, that's powerful Shakta Pita actually. And when you go there, every day they're giving goats. They're cutting. Many, many black goats. Black male goats are offered to Mother Kali. So if you go in the after, like say like 2 p.m., 3 p.m. like that, to step into the temple of Mother Kali, you will have to step over a veritable river of blood. And that's like really disturbing for some people. And of course you can have like a goth aesthetic and everything like that. You could really fetishize all of this in your mind. You could be like, oh cool, there's blood, and when you get there, when you smell that shit, when you see the squealing goat being dragged over to the post, and all of that is just kind of disturbing and difficult for someone who's not used to it. So not necessarily, Sister Nivedita, when confronted with Bali, with the animal sacrifice, that is one of the major features of Kali Puja, she took Vivekananda to task about it a little bit, or at least she was like inquiring into it. She asked, so what's this all about then? And Swami Vivekananda, this is so interesting. He could have said so many different things here. He could have pointed to the whole-scale genocide of the civilized West of animals where they're killed and eaten. And of course, in a way that's kind of duplicitous, because you don't kill your own animals and you eat them, but you don't even have the honesty to like admit that you're eating animals, because instead of saying that you're eating a cow, you say I'm eating beef. Or instead of saying you're eating a chicken, you're eating poultry. Like many people who eat chicken have never held a chicken and like bled it out through its neck. And that's disturbing, because it's manifestly different in the ancient world, where one eats meat, but one participates in the killing and cooking and consuming of that meat, which is a wholly different vibe. Like the animals are dehumanized, arguably, in the current meat industry. But in the Kali Puja context, the goat is worshipped in a sense. Like, I mean, not in a sense, it actually is worshipped. You wash its feet, you like love on it, you put a mala on it, like it's like a very special thing to like have a goat, and then that baby of yours, the beloved goat, is dragged off to the post, and you cut it for Mother Kali, and you put its head on a platter and put a candle in there or a lamp in there and give Esha Sadipa Shirshah Om Adya Kalika Devi Namaha. Anyway, so Sister Nivedita asked about this, but Vivekananda never like felt like he needed to defend it on the level of like, oh, but you guys, you do a genocide of animals in the name of your stomach. At least we are killing them in the name of God. He didn't say any of that. All he said was, and this was so stunning and so evocative and provocative, he said, "What's wrong with a little bit of blood to complete the picture?" Only Kali Bhaktas can say shit like that. It's disturbing. He's saying that no, it's important. It's a part of Kali Puja. So that's something also. So we have the ghosts, we have the jackals, we have the bali, and we have this thing called panchamakaras or some smashan bali, the offering to the cremation ground, which can include panchamakaras, maituna, the sexual union, all of that. And to what extent these rituals are featured in Kali Puja will differ from tradition to tradition. So there are now very viable forms of Dakshinachara type Kali Pujas, like right hand path Kali Pujas, where like maybe these things are either all substituted, um, if not completely omitted. That's also perfectly fair and perfectly legit. But then, of course, as you lean a little more left into the Vamachara kind of Kaula worlds, that's where you start to see a little more of an emphasis on these things. So, for instance, if you were to go to Kerala, actually, the most ancient temple of Mother Kali is in Kerala, where I grew up. There, you see a very strong emphasis on this kind of thing. There's a lot of Bali and a lot of ecstatic, kind of orgiastic worship, actually. And a lot of this is in a jungle setting. And also in Bengal, if you go to a place like Kamakya, which is in Assam, actually, and a place like Tarapeet, which is in Birbhum, West Bengal, or of course in Kolkata, in Kalighat. There you'll see a lot of Bali. And so when you're not prepared for this, it can be very disturbing. But once you understand that this is part of Kali's world, then when you enter her pitas, when you enter her place, you won't be so quick to judge. You'll know, like, this is her tradition. So Smashan, the cremation ground, you can't really build a Kali temple unless you're near a Smashan. Mother won't like it if she can't have a Smashan to go to or access. And there's a temple where I grew up, actually. It's a really beautiful and stunning temple. But first, hello, Rakta Rupini. Raima, so good to see you. I have a story to tell you, actually, about Rakta Rupini and a very important puja principle. It has to do with ghosts and certain like things that we do in puja. In any case, there's a temple where I grew up. It's called the Tale Kali Temple, Tale Bhadra Kali Amman Temple, or something like that, in Sentul. And it's really interesting because the legend of this temple is that when the image was constructed, she was facing head on, like she was looking forward. But then over time, I think one night something happened where with pujaris, the priest came in the next day and her head was turned. This is like a stone statue, a granite, South Indian granite statue. Her head was straight up turned to look at the smashan, the cremation ground next to the temple. And of course, it's an Indian open air cremation ground, where like the bodies just burn on a pyre out in the open. So she's so fascinated with that place because Mahakala Bhairava lives there, her husband, her consort. So the legend is that she turned to like look at her consort who is there wandering in the cremation ground, and she lives more in the cremation ground than in the temple, but she every now and then possesses the image to answer the prayers of the devotees who come and worship her there. That being said, a lot of them don't actually go to the smashan. They're like tentative about it. They might go there when they have funeral rites to perform, but generally they stay out of the smashan. They just come to the temple, offer Ma her garland of limes or her garland of hibiscus flowers. They have the priest intercede on their behalf, and like they pay their priest in order to do some worship, and they go home. And I actually know somebody who in Manikarnika went to see Shiva in Kashi Vishwanath, and she told me this fascinating story. She said she was walking down the steps to the ghat. If you've been Kashi Vishwanath, on the other side, you can walk down to the Ganga. So on the ghat side. Now, Manikarnika Ghat, the Mahasmashan, the great cremation ground of Bhairava, of Shiva, I mean, that's where they live. Shiva and Kali, they like live and have fun there. Like, that's your place. So she was really fascinated with Shiva her whole life. She's done so much Shiva sadhana. And so finally she went to Kashi Vishwanath. She worshipped Shiva in one of the main Shiva temples, at Jyotirlinga no less. And she stepped down to the ghat, went down those steps, and she was looking at Manikarnika, and she told me, she came here. She was telling me the story. She saw, like she had a vision, as it were, of Shiva standing on the other side of the threshold in Manikarnika. Like Shiva's there, white complexioned, covered in ash with his jata, like that form of Shiva, the stula rupa of Shiva. And she claimed that she saw this in a kind of dreamlike mystical vision and was full of devotion and fervor and excitement. And then I said, well, Ma, like, did you plunge in? Did you jump into the Manikarnika, like, ghat and embrace him? And she said, no, I was terrified. I was like, huh, that's interesting to me. She would not set foot in the smashan. She can see Shiva on the other side of the threshold, and yet she was hesitant not to step over the threshold. I think that's very significant. the first time I went to Manikarnika, I remember the moment I stepped over, like immediately, a very shifty sort of character, like immediately came to me and started talking to me and clearly tried to lead me into some situation where I might have been robbed or something. So there's a kind of energy there, in Manikarnika, and I think we all feel it, regardless of our spiritual sensitivity, regardless of our religious views. Some of us are closer to being superstitious, some of us are very secular and atheist, whatever. When we go to Manikarnika, you get a sense for it. There's a guy on the internet, I think he's like testing superstitions and folk theories. He like goes out and like goes into haunted places and he like looks for the chupacabra or something. I think I called Ma Chupacabreshwari the other day, which I'm very, very happy about. The queen of the goat suckers. But like you could go and be like that kind of guy, like that kind of guy. You know what I'm talking about? Where you like don't believe in any of these because you're very much in the Pingala Nadi, in the logical mind, and you know, like Horatio in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. Like maybe you studied logic, you studied some philosophy, so you're very like secure in your logical understanding of the world. So sometimes these kinds of people can be a bit obnoxious because I mean I respect it actually. They're scientifically testing the truth of things, so they'll go and like challenge these supernatural forces. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, this house is haunted. Well, what if I go in there and play like White Girl Pop? How about that? I'll play Kesha in this haunted house, see what happens." And they make like vlogs about it. I know this one guy's like looking for skinwalkers and stuff. He was always like looking around to like get caught in the woods by a skinwalker, like kind of asking for it types. I think even they might be careful about Manikarnika Ghat, There's something about the energies there that are immediately palpable. Oh, I know, I know. Don't worry, my mother is the Ishwari of the chupacabras. If they want to come here and suck goats, I'll be like, you and I have a lot in common. We are both very fond of goat curry. Oh, right, right. Good point. So anyway, like that idea, I didn't say the traditional name, right? But that idea of like testing the waters and trying to go on and put yourself in situations that might be spiritually compromising, that's all well and good if you don't buy into the spiritual ideas that would make that place dangerous. So if you don't actually believe there's such a thing as like, I don't know, ghosts, then maybe you won't be frightened to sit in the smashan all by yourself. But then again, there's something about that place that just like instinctually you'll know to avoid, even if you don't buy into the belief structure that tells you why. So my friend, this is very interesting. She's a devotee of Shiva and she's having a vision of Shiva, as it were. But she, having had a vision of Shiva, was not able to go into the smashans. There's something to it. At any rate, the smashan, the cremation ground, is an important aspect of Kali Puja. And Kali temples, mandirs for Mother Kali, are mandatorily built next to a smashan or near a smashan. And other things too, like it's good to be near a crossroads. Yesterday I was speaking to Dr. Rupini and I just had this view, like I was like looking out the window at Hollywood. And I was like, wait, it's a crossroads. And I don't think I'll ever sit in a cafe for any extended period of time unless that cafe is at a crossroads. I think that's something to be noted also. And there's a blues legend, an American folk legend, I think, where you go to the crossroads to meet the devil and strike a bargain, you know? It's like a kind of a Robert Johnson sort of like went down to the crossroads, kind of like the blues standard. Yeah. So all of that. Anyway, and one final thing, which I think, not one final thing, but one other thing, which I think is maybe the most disturbing aspect of Kali Puja and maybe the most morally ambiguous aspect of Kali Puja, which is Shava Sadhana. So already there are ghosts, there are jackals, these are all things associated to the cremation ground. There are Panchamakaras, which are transgressive offerings. The cremation ground itself is a place of impurity. So it makes sense then to worship with impure, quote unquote, impure substances in a place of impurity. All of that's already there in the kind of world of Kali, if you will. But one more thing. There's this emphasis on Shava sadhana, and that's like there's a mantra for that actually in the puja. Even when we perform the puja in the house, there's a distinct moment when we imagine that we're sitting on a corpse. It's called Shava sadhana. So Shava means corpse. Sadhana means to do your spiritual practice on a corpse. And different kinds of corpses might be required for different results in sadhana. So sitting on a female corpse will give you one kind of result. Sitting on a male corpse, another kind of result, like that. So different corpses, how do you acquire them? Now we get into a somewhat like legally ambiguous gray area, and that's why these things cannot be discussed openly because I'm not actually endorsing that you somehow go out and find a corpse. Like you're not going to dig a grave and find one unless you are going to do that, at which case I didn't tell you to. Like that's on you. But if you have a corpse, then the idea is that you sit on it and perform your sadhana in the cremation ground on Kali Puja night on that corpse. That's an interesting idea in the tradition, and we should explore that a bit. What's that all about? But also one more thing. The mala, the japa mala, the rosary that you use in order to chant Mother Kali's name, it is sometimes mentioned that it's preferable that you do this on a mala of either human bones or some other kind of bone. So I like mahisha bone, buffalo bone. Of course, it has the idea of Mahishasura Mardini, and it's light and it's easy to purchase. It's quite common to find mahisha malas. But there are like yak bones. The Tibetan world has a lot of yak, kind of similar to mahisha bones. But that idea of chanting on a bone mala, that's also significant. It's a significant part of the tradition. And of course, in the Tibetan world, that idea is preserved a little more. So if you want to buy kapala, a skull bowl, which is one of the things that, Mother Kali is associated with, Kapalini, she's called, because that links her to an earlier tradition, the Kapalika tradition, where these yoginis and the yogini kulas were first encountered, historically speaking. So if you want a kapala, or if you want a kangling, or if you want some kind of bone ornaments, like kapala mala, which is like these little polo-looking discs that are made of skulls of humans and whatnot. Like it's probably Tibetan imports or exports people who will give them to you. But it's also a very dodgy world because sometimes these are political prisoners, Sometimes the human bones that come from these Tibetan sources, some of them actually are political prisoners in China, and some of them are maybe like acquired from non-Brahmin smashan. Some of them are like looted from Muslim burial grounds. So like the specification of what kind of skull is important too. It should be the skull of a Brahmana, for instance. The caste of the person whose skull you're using is also considered. I have a tantra. It's called the Yogini Tantra. Actually, when the tantra was given to me, the person was giving it to me and said like, "Oh, this is the Yogini Tantra." I was like, "You mean the Yogini Hridaya Tantra?" And he was like, "No, no, no, it's the Yogini Tantra." And then I did a quick Wikipedia search on that Tantra, and the first line in the Yogini Tantra Wikipedia was the Yogini Tantra, not to be confused with the Yogini Hridaya, which is exactly what I did. But the Yogini Tantra is like a folk Tantra from Assam. And there's a lot of munda, skull sadhanas there. And it specifically calls for the skull of a dog eater. I remember thinking like that's going to be really hard to find because I don't really know anyone who eats dogs. And also, how would I acquire their skull? I suppose like they're yeah, right. Like, do I have to get someone to eat a dog and then have them like donate their skull to me when they're finished using it? I don't know. Like how will I do that sadhana? Because where are the dog eaters? And more importantly, like how will I know this skull is the skull of a dog eater? So that kind of thing, the specification of the skulls, like all of that is part of the world of Kali, if you will. Munda sadhana, sitting. Oh, I guess we should talk also about Panchamundi asana. It's not just about Shava sadhana, it's also about Panchamundi sadhana, where you sit on 5 skulls. One of them is a human skull, the other 4 might be animal skulls, but often they're all 5 human skulls. And there's also like Sahasra Munda sadhana, where you're sitting on like 1,000 skulls, and the whole thing becomes very like macabre and somewhat dubious and of course very attractive for people who are in that energy, in that bhava already. So these are elements I think that make Kali Puja quite distinct. And to the extent that you're identifying with Kali, to different extents you might like manifest these aspects in your daily puja, even if just symbolically. So these are things I want to talk about, like these maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different aspects of Kali Puja that I think make Kali Puja, if you will, the distinctive features of Kali Puja that set it apart from all other kinds of puja. And we'll say there are like the emphasis on bhutas, ghosts, the worship of ghosts, the worship of jackals, the use of the panchamakaras or the forbidden offerings, which includes of course sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? And then the 4th thing is the participation in smashans, cremation grounds, which are places of impurity or crossroads. 5thly, the presence of Shava sadhana, like sitting and doing sadhana on a corpse. 6thly, using ornaments like bone ornaments or japa malas made of yak bones or mahisha bones or human bones, better yet. Wearing bone ornamentation while you do sadhana, that's a 6th thing. 7th thing, maybe we can talk about the Panchamundi asana also, when you sit on 5 skulls, or I'm going to say Panchamundi because that's the only one that I'm familiar with. I haven't performed any other kind of munda asana, but there are many different versions of this, so 100 mundas, 1,000 mundas, like that. But we'll talk about Panchamunda. And maybe like one more thing, the role of, I mean, like I'm at 7 now and I'm very desperate to be at 8. So I'm trying to think of an 8th thing so I can round out my number at 8. But I guess the role of, we'll say something about Bhairavi Brahmani maybe, and the role of like the female teacher and the role of like embodied forms of worship where like a woman is worshipped directly, like a person is worshipped. Like that's also, I think, quite distinctive in Kali Puja, but it's also present maybe in Durga Puja, in Tripura Sundari Puja. Like it's there in the tantric world in general, but I think in the Kali world, it becomes especially important for reasons that we'll get into. So I think this will take us into the idea of aveśa, possession. So I'll talk about like dakinis, which are fierce cremation ground spirits, and why it is that we would actually desire to be possessed by dakinis. And this actually might take us into some cool like Vajroli Mudra, like sexual sadhana kind of discussion. The idea of like stealing Shakti or having Shakti being taken from you in the context of like a sexual encounter. Because in one sense, the Dakinis, they're like vampiric spirits that in the legend will possess a person. And if you have sex with that person, or if you have sex with the Dakini directly, given that you have the spiritual sensitivity to access her directly in that Antariksha Loka, it's very possible that she will quote unquote drink all your blood, which is to say, she will steal all your Shakti. So if like you're not prepared for that sadhana, just like for shits and giggles, she will enter into sexual union with you and kick your butt, right? Like at the end of that union, which might actually be terrifying more than pleasurable. If you want some pleasurable encounters, go to yakshinis, but be careful. They can be incredibly obsessive. And I know some people actually who like their love life is terrible. Like they can never date anymore because they participated in these yakshini sadhanas. They got excited by the idea of being able to like have sex with like some nymph-like apsara type like celestial spirits. They went and did these sadhanas and they succeeded at them. And in their dreams, they would be visited by yakshinis. Yakshinis meaning like nature spirits, but like, yaksha, yakshini, like a fairy, like a nymph. And then from that point on, I could see in their lives actually, these people were like very socially adjusted individuals, which is rare. Very rarely do you get socially adjusted individuals in the ritual context, whether Western or Eastern. And very rarely are socially adjusted, balanced individuals involved in Kali sadhana. But this particular person I have in mind was actually a very mature sadhaka. But in any case, his love life is just fucked, or I guess not fucked. He's not getting fucked. He'll never be fucked again, except by this yakshini, because she interrupts everything. Every time he's about to have a relationship, that yakshini will fuck it up because he's hers. She's very possessive. So it's an interesting thing. And although he's having these like wonderful dream experiences with her, it's become it's the relationship is soured because he would like a human partner and like human children and things like that. And there's this whole like fairy lore of them stealing children that can happen. Like so this is a world. Definitely it's a way of looking at things. So there's yakshini sadhanas, there's dakini, yogini sadhanas. But if one is not powerful enough to enter into sadhana with a dakini, the idea is that she will eat all the flesh and drink all the blood and tear that person to shreds. And they come in packs. The idea is that a dakini never comes alone. It's like jackals. All of them are in the smashan, and if there are like 5 or more jackals, they will attack you. That's one thing about jackals that I've noticed. If it's by itself, it's usually very scared of me. But if there are 5 or 6 of them, then they're not at all afraid. And not only are they not afraid, they're also kind of aggressive. I've seen them chase people out of the smashan, actually. And my friend carries around his Trishul to come to my house, not because he's like a Kapalika Shaiva with his instinct, just because to scare the jackals away, because they come out usually at night when he comes over at that time. And they chase you if there are 5 or 6 of them. And so like Dakinis, imagine, they don't come alone, they come in like a horde of screaming Banji type spirits. And if one doesn't know how to handle that energy, it can be rather problematic. So I've never in my life encountered a case where a person's flesh and blood was literally eaten by a Dakini. I'm sure that happens. The texts sometimes speak of it in those terms. But for me, I've only ever noticed, I mean, this is anecdotally, and I've only seen so little of this world, but it just seems like that those are metaphors. What does it mean to eat the flesh? I mean, I've seen people become really emaciated as a result of these sadhanas, or I've seen people become really depleted. And this is maybe more important. The transfer of knowledge and power has more to do with subtler realities than just the flesh and blood. So the blood is prana actually, and thoughts are a kind of prana. So there are certain thoughts that you can think that will elevate you, that will energize you, and there are other thoughts that you can think that will depress you, that will have a very heavy negative sort of feeling. So those thoughts themselves are an expression of prana. You have to have a lot of prana, arguably, to be able to think the thoughts that the texts are presenting. So you won't be able to study very esoteric, very refined, sophisticated texts unless you are at a certain configuration of prana. If your mind is too dense for it, you will either not understand it at all, which I think is preferable, or worse, misunderstand it. That's why it's terrible that so many people have access to like the Bible or the Quran or like many of these texts, because they're just not energetically able to understand things in a subtler way. They just take everything literally, and then of course it leads to a lot of pain for themselves and for others because the mind is not refined. It's not subtle enough to interact with a very high level spiritual text like the Bible, like the Quran. These are really profound revelations that are spoken in dream language, that are, to use that term, or spoken in a symbolic way that you have to be able to like have the sensitivity for, you know? So that being said, it takes prana to think things. Thoughts themselves have a prana to them. So imagine if a Dakini comes and she demands prana, if she wants a sacrifice of prana, that might look like semen, like actual physical semen, but it also might look like your memories, your expertise, your talents and abilities. She might devour those, and then you might find that you never write a poem again after you meet such a Dakini. You know, like, because she's taken your power of poetry, like that idea. But then this is where it gets interesting. The Vajroli Mudra idea is where, like, when you make love to a Dakini, it's also possible to overpower her and take her stuff. And then, like, Dharma and I were talking about this in the car, I think on the way to a Homa. This idea of, like, actually now it becomes a spiritual tug of war, which is all part of a Leela for a particular kind of person. The Dakinis like it. They like testing themselves in this way. There's a particular kind of Leela where you're in this sort of spiritual tug of war, pardon the pun, with the Dakini. And if you win, then you will absorb her Shakti, which is desirable actually, because she has considerable Shakti, but also knowledge. And so the pursuit of moksha, the pursuit of spiritual liberation, requires jnana, knowledge. And so there's a way in which this isn't a magical kind of power-seeking worldly practice. There's a way in which this can be conceived of in very refined, like renunciation-oriented, moksha-oriented, transcendentalist framework. So like when you succeed at this, you gain the knowledge of the Dakini, whereby the Dakini is able to teach you about the ultimate nature of reality. So you might get tantras from Dakinis. If you like, if you overpower the Dakini in this sexual wrestling match, she might be beholden to give you a tantra, or you might just like have it. You might just have this tantra downloaded, as it were. So that's one way of looking at things, but I prefer to look at things more devotionally. So here, one doesn't need to overpower a Dakini in a sexual wrestling match. One only has to be her equal. That's very important. One must match her. If one doesn't match her, then that disparity might be an insult to her. She might not even come. And I don't think, pardon the pun, and I don't even think that one needs to be more powerful than her, because who could be more powerful than a Dakini, honestly? They're the handmaidens of my divine mother, embodiments of power themselves. I have no aspirations of becoming more powerful than a Dakini or overcoming a Dakini. I have no such aspiration. But it is possible to at least be her equal, as it were. Or not even her equal, but like somebody that she would even consider entering into a union with. And there it becomes more devotional, where it's like now it's the worship of the Dakini. It's not an attempt to overpower the Dakini and wrest the secrets from nature violently. Right? Yeah, round one fight. I found a much better way to fight, actually. Like, fighting is great, but there's nothing like being a child, because the Dakini has a motherly vibe. So sometimes we overpower her through surrender, through love, through devotion. She can't resist. She can't resist pure love. Like, she likes semen, she likes Shakti, she likes prana, but she likes devotion even more. And you know what? There's something to this. Devotion is a very high configuration of prana. Like, to be devoted to something, to like really love something intensely and sustainably takes a lot of prana. I mean, just think about how energized you are when you're in love, but also think about how hard it is to sustain that love over a long period of time. You know, people take up Kali sadhana for all of like 2 years, if even that. Sometimes it's just Halloween season or something. They're into Kali sadhana for a little bit and they drop the whole thing, and now they're like doing something else, you know. And so it's very hard to stick with something for a long period of time. It takes prana. It takes prana to be able to do that. That's why I'm really proud of our community, because since 2020, we've been able to meet every Monday, no matter what. Every single Monday for this satsang. You know, it used to be at 9 p.m. and then we scaled it back to 7 p.m. But except for that change, we haven't missed a single Monday night satsang in 5 years. Touch wood, that will continue. And that's important to me because that's an expression of prana. It's called nitya karma or nitya seva. It takes a lot of prana to be consistent with something. Consistency is one thing, but you know what? Intensity is another, and often you don't get the two together. If somebody's very intense about something, that's great, but they're often not very consistent. And sometimes when people are very consistent, they're not very intense. So yeah, this red, not the Tara red, but the other red in Paris. Yes, Ma, you remember back then when I had no beard. We've been doing this so long that even a beard has grown in. But that idea of like, you could be doing something a long time, but that doesn't imply that there's an intensity. Doing something intensely for a long period of time, that's devotion. So that a Dakini really loves. If you have devotion for a Dakini, like true devotion, and it's not like meek supplication or surrender either. You know, it's like when people have nothing to offer and then they like are in your DMs trying to get you to pay attention to them. Like that's not, I mean, like, you know, it's like they're trying to take from you. A Dakini is not going to be interested in that kind of interaction. There needs to be something that she feels that she can also gain, that maybe is also able to sustain her interest. And so a certain level of sadhana is required to get to the place where that devotion would even matter to the Dakini. And of course, what to say of that devotion itself? Like one needs a lot of sadhana, a lot of discipline, a lot of practice to be able to even vibrate on that level of love and consistent, intense love, to say the least. So that we prefer that approach of like worshiping Dakinis with devotion out of love for Mother Kali. Because we love Mother Kali, we love her emanations, her handmaidens. So we worship the yoginis and Dakinis with fervor and with love and with devotion in the hopes that, I mean, we don't even care if they do this or not. It's enough that we love them. There's no transaction here. But generally we say, if a Dakini is pleased with one's devotion, with one's worship, then she confers upon that person freely knowledge, out of favor. She favors them, and it's her blessing. She gives them knowledge and she gives them power. So that idea of the Dakinis possessing the Bhairava. And oh, Orama, yes, it's a beautiful name. I would love to take some questions, and we will. I think we'll try to finish a little earlier today. I always say that I never get to do it. So I'll try to finish, and then we'll be what do you call it? We'll be in our Q&A period and we can do that. But yeah, like I think a lot of this also is important for people who want to heal from things. So a Dakini might be able to confer knowledge, which of course is one of the most rarefied gifts. That's ultimately that's what we want, right? Like ultimately we want knowledge because that knowledge is liberating. From the Shaiva perspective, jnana is so important. It's jnana that frees us. Abhinavagupta opens Tantrasara with this claim. Jnana moksha hetuhu. Iha jnana moksha hetuhu. That's the opening line in the Tantrasara after the Mangala shlokas and all that. Knowledge, by knowledge is not meant conceptual knowledge. By knowledge is meant insight. Gnosis, I guess you're Gnostic, not Gnosis in the sense of like Vipassana, insight, true insight into the ultimate nature of reality. Oh my God, look at Durga's lion, Jaima, Jaimas. So this insight is of the form of energy. It's not necessarily a concept in the mind. You know, those concepts are also energetic, but they might not be embodied in the way that I'm speaking of now. So I have in mind, you know, like Nishkriyanandaji, there's this kind of idea of he's in the smashan, he's talking to his guru. His guru is a mauna, he doesn't say anything. The guru is silent all the time, is observing mauna, silence. And then one day, while they're in the smashan, the guru points up like that. And Nishkriyananda looks up to where his guru is pointing, and suddenly in a thundercloud appears this wild-haired lady, like a Elokeshi, like Dakini or Kali. So that lady appears and laughs hysterically at Nishkriyananda. And he's just like, he's like full of the Shakti of this darshan of Ma. And then Ma points down to Nishkananda's guru and points out a book in the guru's possession. So the guru, arguably the guru is teaching his disciple something. So the guru needs a book. The guru is probably referring to a text in order to be able to teach tantra to his disciple. What is tantra but a book? And the teachings of the book are what the guru is supposed to present or represent rather. So anyway, the guru is holding a book in this scene. And Kali, who appears in the storm cloud, Maha Megha Prabham Shyama, if you will, she instructs Nishkirananda by pointing to the book and then giving a teaching based on this, like literal symbology of the book. Because the book in the Indian context is like leaves held between two boards, and usually there are five, sometimes three, sometimes seven cords, kind of like a folder that's a binder, you know, like that. So these five cords wrap around and the book is closed like that. So these five cords are described as the five pranas, and the two boards are described as the full moon and the new moon, the in-breath and the out-breath, like all the dualities, etc. So the goddess is able to confer so much knowledge based on the book. So you can imagine Nishkiranda is looking at a book and having this quote unquote download, if you will. Then something even more important happens. After Mother gives this teaching, she then breaks the book, and then he's like free from that point on, and he's plunged into bliss. So that's what I mean. It's not just the conceptual knowledge, but that too is valuable. You know, it's not nothing to have conceptual knowledge. Very few people do. A lot of people are reading, a lot of people are learning, but very few people are retaining. It's very hard to understand what it is you have read, or to be able to apply it, or to be able to understand it in the context of a larger system. You can hear the words, and you know, I've heard people say the right words even. They're able to describe all the 24 tattvas of Sankhya, they can do all of that. And they might even give nice talks on it. But I don't think there's actual understanding or actual retention. But if there is, if one is comfortable with the concepts of the tradition, that's blessing actually. That's grace. It takes a lot to be able to read, to understand, and then to retain what you've understood. I think again, it's that retention. That's where the Shakti is required. Consistency and intensity. So having said that, the subtlety of the mind, it should not be underestimated. Very few of us have it. The mind is filled with ideas, as Rajeshwara is pointing out, in a very heady culture where information is commerce. Like there's so many ideas available, and we're just ingesting these ideas, and we have this kind of psychic indigestion where none of these ideas are actually being assimilated. And so when you talk to a person like this, you very quickly see how muddled they are. There's no clarity of insight. And so that's no joke. Clarity of insight, being able to keep everything in its proper place, having a proper mental filing system where all the doctrines and ideas go so that you can compare them. All of those things are very important, and it's the grace of the Dakini actually that such things become available to us. But what to say then of embodied knowledge? You know, of course you are ready. Hmm. Yeah, and that kind of study, that ability to like understand things, that's considerable. So in this story of Nishkananda meeting the Dakini in the cloud, like you can see there's more than just information, but there is that too. So that's what I mean, jnana. That's what we want, and the Dakini can give us that. But the word jnana is almost interchangeable with Shakti, with power. You know, like with knowledge comes power. Like that idea that knowledge is power. So this kind of knowledge that I'm talking about is not the powerless, anemic, conceptual knowledge that we often mistake. That's just information. Information is not knowledge. You can use the word wisdom, you can use the word gnosis, whatever you want. But this is the grace of the Dakini. So this is what we want. But again, it's not something we're asking for. If it comes inadvertently. Our purpose, arguably, from this tradition's point of view, is just to love and just to have devotion for a Dakini in for our own sake, you could argue. Inadvertently, tripto bhavati, madho bhavati, atmarama bhavati. You know, in the Narada Bhakti Sutra, it says one becomes satisfied, one becomes drunk, one becomes an enjoyer of the bliss of the self. But inadvertently, it's not even important to us. We don't care about liberation. Who cares about that? We don't even care about knowledge and power. It just so happens that when a Dakini is pleased with you, she confers upon you all of these things. Just like when Lakshmi is pleased with you, she might confer upon you some material abundance or some luxury or some beauty or some spiritual abundance. Here, when a Dakini is pleased, she gives you power. And almost you could say like there's no way of saying what that power will look like. For some people, it could just be just pure intellectual insight, pure conceptual knowledge, which would be considerable. For another person, it could be extraordinary amounts of vigor and energy. And yet for another person, it could be beauty. That person will radiate a kind of charisma, a sort of magnetism that will be very attractive to people. Almost problematically so, maybe, for that person. Or that person might have like a siddhi. They might suddenly be able to like predict the future or read people's thoughts, or like their intuition becomes clearer. There's no saying what the Dakini can give you because her range of gifts is quite vast. And what then will you ask for? Well, different people come to them for different things. Like some people want to heal like the kidney, or want to heal something, or fix a family problem, or sort out a financial difficulty. Like that's perfectly valid. There's no problem there. And so the Dakini might ask you, Varam Bruhi, what do you want? I'm pleased. I'm pleased with your sadhana. I'm here. Let me do something for you. What do you want? She might ask you. And you might have an answer actually. You might be like, kill my enemies. That's often what we call Dakinis for. Shatrukshaya ma, Shatrukshaya, Kuru Kuru Hum Pat Swaha. Oh ma, I have this person. I don't know, for whatever reason, like they're suing me in court or something, kill them. And the Dakini will say, gladly. She loves to do that. And often the way she will do it is by deranging them. She will appear in their dreams. They might never get any sleep. Or when they're like, like trying to say something, she might intercede and have them say the wrong thing, or like occlude their intellect, and things like it all happens on the level of the mind. So that's why when people are talking about ghosts and dakinis and yoginis and this very eclectic and somewhat disturbing world of tantra, the secular mind might quickly say, "Oh, that's all in the head, though." Yeah, where else would it be? Like where else is anything? Have you ever experienced anything outside of the context of your own mind? It is all mind. The entire physical world is nothing but a gross expression of thought, of mentality. So here, the whole effect of the Dakini is in the mind. It's going to be psychological. That's what Antariksha Bhava means. The Antariksha Bhava, sorry. Antariksha Bhava means the astral world. That doesn't necessarily have to be in the physical world. And people look for it in the physical world. And that's why they miss the subtlety of a Dakini when she comes. And of course, like there might be a cold sensation in the body. Things might physically move in the room. You might, if you're lucky, have a physical sensation of the Dakini, even in terms of sight. You might see the woman. But that's not necessary. Her presence is far subtler than that. Sometimes she's channeled through people. Sometimes she appears in the form of a jackal, like symbols might indicate her presence and charged symbols. Other times she just appears as a kind of inspiration in the mind. And being able to distinguish these from all of our own delusions and our own ideas, that takes a lot of spiritual refinement. So, how is this not magical thinking? How is this not a destabilizing, spiritual psychosis inducing thought? How is this to be distinguished from my own like psychological baggage? All of these are valid and important questions to ask, and maybe we can explore them. We did already explore them last week or the week before, but we can take them up again. Okay, so having said all of that, these are 8 features I think that make Kali Puja quite special. I could stop the lecture now, and I think it would be cool. Right? Like already, we've said some, I think, important things that make Kali Puja, explaining why Kali Puja is special. So if nothing else, you have a list of at least 8 things to think about when you think about Mother Kali. But I thought we could do better than that. Let's maybe look at some of the mantras, like some examples of what I'm talking about, which is present in the padati itself. So where in the padati do you encounter these elements that I've recently sketched out for you? So maybe I'll start with the story. So Raktarupini Devi is playing harmonium and singing. Can I tell the story? I think it's quite instructive and good. I don't know. Maybe you should tell it, Ma. Like I think you tell it better. Because I mean, it happened to you, so maybe you should. Because I was gonna tell the story like from your point of view, but I was like, wait, but if you're gonna be here, maybe you should just say what what happened.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Jaima, Jaima, Jaima.
So I was playing harmonium and singing at the Monday night puja. What was that, like last week now? And I wasn't planning on playing that long. I was originally just gonna lead a kirtan and then kind of riffing. Nish kind of had me keep playing. So like I wasn't prepared. I didn't have anything around me. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, I just like need to get up for a minute and get some water and I'm gonna come back. So I left the harmonium and I came back. And when I came back and I started playing the harmonium, there was just like random notes that were going off. Like they were just like a weird feeling. And at first I thought maybe somebody like bumped it and then realized it was like spiritual interference. And I was like, oh, when I left my seat for like a second, something else came in and is now being a little mischievous. And after I told Nish that experience, he was like, yeah, you're not ever supposed to get up after puja for that reason. Because spirits can come in and like what just cause ruckus. Take your seat, essentially. Yeah.
And it's a very important story because like this is like a collaborative attempt to invoke the presence of the deity. So Devi is here like singing, and it's less of a kirtan, although it was certainly that, and more of like a priestess invocation of a particular kind of energy. So like as she's doing this over the course of maybe like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, there's like a strong mold, as it were, like a shape that's built in the astral, if we can use this symbolic language. And it's like this astral sheath around Devi, the energy that she's projecting. And when we vacate that, it becomes almost like a temporary place where some other being can take embodiment. Those beings, those energies might otherwise be scattered and more all pervasive, but then because that's already there, like a kind of form in the Western ceremonial tradition, they talk about like God forms and things like that. It's like there, they go inside there. And so, Devi, I like how you said when you came back to sit on the asan, there was a sense of like a pushback, as if somebody was like there and trying to push you out of it.
And what's interesting is intuitively, I felt like I wasn't supposed to leave, but I didn't want to be like a princess and tell
Ah,
somebody else to get me my water.
yeah, we talked about that too because as you know, I'm like an absolute diva when
I
it
should have
comes
just been a little
to
princess like you.
yeah, like me. She's no, I'm intolerable. Once I sit for puja, I'm like barking orders and I'm like very short with people because when we're in the zone and worshiping the goddess, there's like no time to fuck around. I'm not gonna nicely say, "Hey, can you please help me?" Like, go get that or do this. And I'm sorry if you've been in the puja space with me and if you've volunteered to help with the puja, I'm so sorry because I become intolerable when it comes to worshiping the Divine Mother. There's no time for nicety. But like that idea of like being a diva, it's like, why would you tell someone to go and get something from the kitchen for your puja? Why wouldn't you just go and get it? And I think this story is so important. I'm like really happy that you told it, Devi, because this story I think demonstrates a corroboration, as it were, of a traditional idea in puja, which is one should never leave one's seat of worship. So, like I was saying earlier, I was setting everything up, and I was like, "You guys, give me a few moments to get the tea and whatnot, because I don't want to have to leave my seat once I start giving the lecture." And this is why, because before we give a lecture, before we do puja, we put down an asan, a seat, asana, and the quality of the seat is important too. Like we want, yeah, seva for puja princesses. Watch out. If anybody volunteers to do seva for the puja, I'm probably going to be a bit strict. But like the idea of like what seat are you going to put down, that matters. Like so deer skin, tiger skin. For fiercer deities, sometimes it's required that we sit on tiger skin. That asan has more protection, as it were, from various entities and beings and whatnot. So seat is important. You have to sit on something. And then one should not leave one's seat for any reason. So once you're sitting for puja, you're sitting for puja. That's that. However, there's a kind of workaround. So one of my favorite pictures from the Kali Mandir, Laguna Beach, when they used to have these like big Kali pujas at the Annalisa school. It's interesting. The Annalisa school used to be a center for Rajneesh and his crew. So it was like an Osho kind of cult center actually. And then somebody bought it and turned it into a kindergarten, which was really cute. So there's a beautiful hall, and they used to do Kali Puja there. They used to rent out the kindergarten over the weekend and do like a 3 day Kali Puja. And Haridan Chakravarti, the head priest at the Dakshineshwar temple, in Sri Ramakrishna's family lineage, would come. He would come for like years, every year to perform this Kali Puja once a year. And there's this beautiful picture of Haridan like standing off to one side. I think he's like doing the arati or something that required him to get off his seat. And then Pranab, I never met Haridanji. He was before my time. Of course, he's a great inspiration to us. One of those charismatic pujaris, like madman for Ma kind of people, who is a very influential teacher in this part of the world. Of course, he's the head priest at Dakshineshwar. So a very important spiritual personality in the Kali world. But in any case, the fact that he was here in Usha's like one bedroom apartment, worshipping Mother Kali, they snuck him out like dressed as a woman because it would be kind of problematic to get him to come to America and like so he took leave and then they put him in a carriage, dressed him up in a shawl, and then like snuck him out of the temple so he could come here to America and perform the Kali Puja. Allegedly, he was the kind of guy who would, if you took him to a restaurant, which he didn't like to go to, by the way, he loved to cook and he was very like particular about what kind of foods that he ate, and he liked to cook his own food. He taught everyone to make dal, etc. But if you did take him to the restaurant, one time they did. I heard this story. He's the kind of person that will like walk into the kitchen, just like stride into the kitchen of that restaurant and look into all the pots and start barking orders. Very charismatic, very like rock star type Kali Pujari. Necessarily a person filled with Shakti because he's worshipping Shakti. In any case, he was before my time. I never met him, but I did meet Pranabji. So whenever I go to Dakshineshwar, Pranab is like my guy. Like I always meet him. He like takes care of us and he hosts us there. Because of our connection to Kali Mandir, we met Pranabji. And Pranab is like the assistant of Haridan. So at that time, Pranab was very young. He was like Haridan's like right hand guy, or left hand guy, I guess you can say. And there's a picture of Pranab, like it's a stage, and he's standing at the stage with both of his hands, palms face down on the asan, on Haridan's asan, while Haridan is standing over there, which shows you something interesting. You can leave your asan, but only if your Tantra Dharak, meaning your assistant, is there holding your asan down. So in that puja, because Devi was assisting me if I were to get up, if she were to like put a hand on my asan, it'd be fine. Because she's like holding it down. But and if I were to like hold your asan down, then you could have gone in the water. Except why would you? Because you should send someone else to do it. Okay. But the idea of like having someone occupy the asan, even if only symbolically, that makes a difference. And so there are these rules in puja that we hear about. And like we were talking about yesterday at the crossroads, this idea of like, where do these rules come from? Are they arbitrary? And some of them really are, like we call them black cat rules. These are rules that just like are rules because of tradition. They don't actually have any basis in reality. So for example, there's this case, there was a guru who had a black cat. And every time when he would do puja, the cat would get into all the prasad offerings. It would jump on the altar, knock things over. You know how animals can be, some animals. So Gurudeva, this particular Gurudeva, he like tied that cat to a pole every time they were about to do a big puja. So when that Gurudeva passed away, of course, the cat was long gone too. The disciples would continue the tradition of doing puja, but they would never do it unless a black cat had been acquired. So they would be very stressed. They'd be like, oh my God, we don't have a cat. Somebody go and find a black cat in the town, and then let's tie it to this pole, and then only we can do puja. Because they thought that there was some significance to tying the black cat to a pole before doing puja. These are black cat rules. They don't actually have any basis in anything spiritually like significant. They're just traditions. And so are all puja rules like that? I'm sure many of them are. Like my grandfather used to make a joke. I don't know how serious he was, because he did have a kind of skeptical bhava too. He was very sensitive about priestcraft. He actually didn't like priests because he felt like priests often they were very scammy and He didn't like the idea of like intercession of a person between him and God. Although he himself was a pujari, and although he himself was a temple singer, that was his main thing. He would go to the temple and just like sing and lead the singing, but he didn't very much like priests. And interestingly, it was because he felt like they were using their rules to make money and to like bastardize the traditions and things like that. So anyway, he was very skeptical of many things that we did in puja. So one time, I don't know how serious he was, but he was joking about the arati. He said, "Have you ever wondered why they wave the arati like that? Like so, the arati deepa mala, it's called the aratrika deepa mala, the arati lamps, 5 lamps. You wave it before, or some very big ornate like 100 lamps where you wave before the deity. So he asked me, why do they do that? Why do they circle it around? And that was the kind of education I got with him. He was always asking me to like challenge things and question things that I saw in puja, which is very lucky because most people, when they're in this world, they just do things because they're told to and they're not like told to like questions. I'm very grateful for that. Now, his claim was that it has no like particular spiritual significance. It just has to do with the fact that back then and even now, the garbhagriha, like the place where you place the deity, is deep inside like this small like sanctum sanctorum with a long tunnel. Because if you didn't do that, the cows of the temple would stick their head in and eat all the prasad. So animals would get into the prasad if you didn't bury the deity in like a deep garbhagriha. But if the deity is in a garbhagriha in a world pre-electricity, then how would you show the deity to the assembled masses? Well, you would have to have a lamp, and the way to show the whole deity was to whirl the lamp so that the people could see the whole deity. Like that was my grandfather's explanation as to why we whirl the arati light around and why we whirl it first at the feet, then at the heart, and then at the face, and then around the whole deity. So my grandfather was very fond of giving these like practical, secular explanations for puja because he felt the magic and mystery was in God, not necessarily in God's rituals. Though those rituals were powerful ways to connect with God, the mystery is not something that needs to be like exegetically understood. Things can just be practical and grounded, and that's fine. That was fine for him. In any case, are these rules like that? I think Rakta Rupini is pointing out that like some of them actually are real because that was, when you push a harmonium key, sometimes the third and the fifth will also push down. Harmoniums do that sometimes. But in this case, as Devi was just pointing out, it was different. It was like discordant notes were being pushed in a way that was kind of like disconcerting and weird. It was like someone was pushing keys on the harmonium and like interfering. And not only that, there was a sense of like a pushback almost. That's one thing. And then some of you who are staying over in the house, many of you, like more than one of you, corroborated having seen a particular kind of being in the house, which is interesting because, of course, those of you who were staying in the house were already quite spiritually sensitized to begin with. Someone like Asha would have no problem seeing this kind of thing. But if you already have that capacity to see into these realms, I think it's very special when things can be corroborated. So I don't say anything about this particular person who's in the house. Like even when he's there and I'm seeing him, I'm not going to say anything about it. But it was really interesting to me that some of you saw him too, and in describing him, corroborated what actually his astral form is, because there's a particular form he likes to take in this house, and he has a purpose here. He does something here, but I don't talk about him ever. This is maybe my first time ever mentioning him in a public context. I generally don't like to talk about these kinds of things. They're not kinds of things that you should talk about because you can't. Not because they should be secret, but also because we do a disservice by putting into the conscious mind that which is only symbolically available to that grander mind. In any case, some of you saw this guy and you like described him and it was corroborated, and that's very interesting to me. So the world of Kali is very much this kind of world. It's a world of spirits, it's a world of dreams and symbols. It's a world that the conscious mind flounders in, and that can be kind of challenging for us. So in Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, one of my favorite lines, of course, they're very good lines. My favorite line is Hamlet chastising his very intellectual and left-brained friend. And he says to him, "There is more to heaven and earth than is spoken of in your philosophy books, Horatio." And that's because they just saw a ghost. Like Hamlet just saw his father strolling on the parapet, warning them of some impending doom. They're about to be attacked. And the whole play opens with this foreboding sense of doom. And it comes through a ghost revealing a prophecy to Hamlet. Horatio also saw the ghost, but Horatio doesn't believe in ghosts. So he's trying to like explain it away. And Hamlet's only response is to say, "There's more to heaven and earth than is spoken of in your philosophy books, Horatio." It's remarkable. So like that idea, when you come to puja, in the beginning you might not care about this stuff. You're like maybe you might be secular, atheistic, you're more interested in the philosophies of our tradition, etc., etc. But then when you actually start doing puja, you can't deny it anymore. If your puja is a sincere and consistent and concerted puja, shit happens is all we can say. And then we have to confront this possibility that there might be more to this world than we understand. And then we have to confront that for a long time we've only been studying philosophy. We haven't approached this in an embodied way because Tantra has always been about rituals. And it's only when you get your feet wet. And that's why I'm like imploring all of you, please, please, for God's sake, if you're going to participate in Tantra, stop standing by the side of the pool and dipping your toe every now and then and saying Kali, Kali, Kali. Jump into the water. Do puja. Do hours and hours and hours and hours of puja. Learn puja. It's not easy, but the things really worth attaining in life rarely are. But put in the hours and like learn the techniques, and the sadhana will just flourish. Like everything else, the japa, dhyana, all of that just flourishes because it was all developed, we would argue, in the context of puja. So this brings me to the next point. The world of puja is indeed mysterious, but it is quintessentially what Tantra is all about. This magical, mystical world that has its roots in the Vedic kind of yagya system, which arguably has its roots in shamanic traditions of the region. So really, Tantra, I would argue, is a shamanic revival movement. Right? It's like the idea that like in a highly urban society, we are now reinvesting in autochthonous deities like Kali, who are like ancient Kerala jungle deities. Why is she now, this jungle woman, mad, wild haired, ecstatic, orgiastic, blood worshipped goddess? Why is she now available in the highest court of the Brahmanas in Kashmir? Why are the Chidambaram high class Brahmanas worshipping her? And why are the kings of the Shaiva world all like patronizing temples of this jungle deity? Because there is this conscious mind that deeply hungers for the feminine. You can only be lost in a world of masculine abstraction for so long before all the juice is gone. In one sense, this is what the Grail quest is all about. You know, the mythology of the Grail quest is a person, usually a farmer, usually someone who like tills the soil, is called to retrieve this holy grail for a kingdom in order to restore the kingdom, because the kingdom usually is in a famine or something. The king is kind of like King Theoden episode of Lord of the Rings, like Two Towers kind of coded, and the whole place is just suffering. There's no rain, meaning there's no moisture, there's no juice, there's no emotion. Everything's dried up. This is what happens when you live in the secular mind, when you live in the logical mind of facts and concepts and established structures and whatnot. That's good, it's helpful, it's something. But if you stay there for too long, your fields will dry up. There will be no rain. All the life and juice will be sucked out of you, and you'll become like this like king on a throne, ruling over a kingdom of ash and bone and corpses. Not even the sexy Kali way, but just in that sad, dry way. And so this, usually a young boy will take up the quest to go and find the Holy Grail, which is of course a symbol of femininity. It's like the container of it's a womb, it's the yoni, and he brings it back to the kingdom, and then the kingdom is restored. They attain eternal youth, eternal life. So the conscious mind can only go so long without the goddess. It requires immanence and embodiment to live, actually. So going Tantra is like a highly urbanized, highly structured, highly conceptual culture reaching back into antiquity to restore that which made life most meaningful, the mystery and magic of ritual. And the thing about India, the beautiful thing about India is that it's an extant tradition of ritual. So there are like, at least by conservative estimates, 9,000 years of like developed ritual modalities and technologies that have their roots, of course, in the Vedas, but can even be seen in pre-Vedic times, like in the Mohenjo-daro Harappan civilization, which is called now the Indus Valley civilization. There's so many ritual structures, early Homa kundas, arguably even early Charanamrita kundas, where you would bathe the Shiva Lingam and collect the water from the Shiva Lingam. There were so many structures present in those archaeological digs that clearly had no other practical purpose. They were sacred symbols or symbolic use type things, which is interesting for a culture that had like very few resources. To invest a significant amount of those resources in things that had no practical worldly value is significant, isn't it? That shows you like how important ritual and magic and sacredness is to humankind. Like there is no human civilization without religion, and there is no religion without ritual, because ritual is the ability to cultivate and call in the sacred. And it's the Vedas that arguably articulate one of the world's most developed and sophisticated ritual systems of all time because of the early mastery of record keeping, but arguably also might have something to do with the region. There might just be a certain energy in that place that allows people to like tap into this in like a statewide, nationwide cultural project whose scale has never before been seen. Tribes all around the world have been practicing ritual for centuries, but rarely do we get access to like codified, I guess you could say, records of what those rituals look like. So this would be the employment of the conscious rational mind in the best way as a servant of Mother Kali. Here, the record keeping, the bookkeeping, the systems of mathematics and astronomy, all that left brain stuff. I know that idea of left and right is a bit dated also, sorry. But like all of that is employed, but for the magical, for the sacred, for the extra mundane. So what you get are the Vedas, and they're like in the Vedas, infinite rituals and infinite ritual modalities. The word japa comes from the Vedas. So when you're doing japa sadhana, which is mainly like what Tantra is all about these days, we have to remember that that has a Vedic precedent. Japa is when you chant Vedic mantras under your breath off to the side to support the other ritualist around the fire. Isn't that interesting? Like japa is like an assist, a ritualistic assist that you will do in order to help the yagya. And the idea of the yagya is like a group of people coming together and using their voice. That's why it's so special when we hear Rakta Rupini sing during the Kali Puja, because that's the Vedas. The Vedas is about singing. It's about using the voice to move energy. It's not about singing a particular song. It's about using the voice to tap into reality, which is nothing but resonance. So singing and speaking and voice, obviously mantra is nothing but the use of voice on various levels of subtlety. So the whole thing about mantra, it all comes down to the Vedas, and the Vedas arguably are timeless. So we have this ritual system as Abhinavagupta points out in his understanding of tantric history, I guess you could say like tantric legend, Lord Shiva teaches the tantras, as we know, to restore the Vedas. So his claim is that the Vedas are supreme, they're par excellence, they're awesome, they're really good. It's just that we need to hear it again in a way that makes more sense for our Kali Yuga. So the Tantra gets its authority by revisiting an ancient source of spiritual wisdom and representing it, as it were, in a more updated form. So in this Kali Yuga, the Agamas and the Tantras are the best way to practice with the Vedas. But again, Lord Shiva doesn't teach anything new. He just repackages what was always there. So with his 5 heads, he speaks the tantras into existence. And according to the Kaula myth, the southward facing head speaks the Lalita Tripura Sundari tradition, the Dakshina tradition, which actually we belong to because we worship Dakshina Kali. Then in the northern transmission, you get Guya Kali. And in the western transmission, Kubjika Mata, which is more popular in Nepal. I've never taken any dikshas into that, except maybe in a Hatha Yoga sense. And then in the left, sorry, what is called Purvamnaya. It's very important. It's a trika, para. So all these goddesses and their traditions and their worship all come from Lord Shiva's revelation of the Agamas, which, as we know, is nothing but the Vedas revamped. So that's what a tantra is. A tantra is a textbook of ritual. So when we learn tantra, it's not enough that we learn the very refined philosophies. I would even argue, and maybe many of you will corroborate this, having had the experience of puja. It's not even like doing mantra japa, although that's often hailed as being the practice par excellence, repeating the mantra that you were given in Diksha. That's important. It's not even meditation, arguably, because that's also important. But again, what is any of that without the power and potency of puja? Asidji, Jai Ma, come ji. I made some chai for you, but I hope you don't mind that it's cooled down a little bit.
Wonderful.
Come, sit. So what is any of this? Japa, dhyana, meaning repetition of mantras, meditation. What is any of this really outside of the context in which it was developed? And so when we study the Tantra, we have to be very clear about what we're doing. We're engaging with a ritual tradition. A tantrika, above all, is a ritualist, is a person that employs sacred word, sacred gesture, at the sacred times in order to create sacredness. That's all a ritual is. It's the right word at the right time in the right place with the right intention in order to create some effect within and without. So you could say then 4 elements of puja. One is kriya, the action that you're performing. And these actions are significant. So if I were to do this, that has an effect. And if you're on the road and you flip somebody off, like that will change the atmosphere around you. And if I were to do this, or if I were to do this, or if I were to go like it all has a certain effect on us, like the mirror neurons fire in a particular way, etc. So the gesture is important, the action, if you will, the kriya. But not just that. When we perform a kriya, an action, it is also attended to by a sound or a formulation, a mantra, if you will. So kriya is attended to by mantra. So if you're going to offer flowers at the altar, that's good. That already that's profound. If you just put flowers at the feet of an image, that's wonderful. But when you add to that the correct mantra, which goes with that kriya, then you get a ritual action because now body and speech are brought together in one flow of action. So usually the mind is going this way, the speech is going that way, and the body is going this way. As beings, we're very scattered beings, and therefore we have no prana. We have no prana because, like it's like a Mongolian form of execution. Our prana, our body, and our mind are like horses running in all these different directions, and we are dismembered, and all our prana flows out like blood pouring into the Mongolian Central Asian earth. So that won't do in puja. Puja is all about cultivating energy, becoming a battery for prana. And the way to do that is by having every part, every dimension of my being flow in one even direction. So therefore, the body and the speech are brought into the act. The right action plus the right mantra. It's not enough though. The mind must also be engaged. So in India, we find that a lot of people doing puja, they have the right actions and they even have the right mantras. Nothing is happening. Why? Because something deeper, arguably the deeper level to all of this is what's happening in the mind. This we call bhava. And I think I'll start with jnana. Jnana meaning the understanding of why I did what I did and understanding of why I said what I said. So when we learn mantras, it's important that we know what they mean. Maybe not in some contexts, the mantras are inherently powerful whether or not you know what they mean. The sounds themselves will have an effect, but they're especially powerful, I think, when you can contemplate their meaning and understand what you're saying. But not only that, also it's especially important to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. This is called jnana. So much of the philosophy of Tantra, which people tend to fixate on in our information-oriented, heady, philosophical, masculine world, that philosophy, it's really interesting. It's exegetical. The purpose of tantric philosophy, for the most part, is just to explain tantric ritual. This, my friends, is maybe one of the most important points that I can make as a lineage holder within the tradition, having grown up in the tradition. Like, this is where I think something happens with a lot of these like Western scholars who are approaching the tradition. And I think all that's really great, but it's just they do things like Westerners. And I don't mean to mean that pejoratively. I just mean it's all about information, it's all about knowledge, it's all about concept. And when it comes to ritual, they dismiss that as maybe an older part of the tradition that somehow, you can accept as a means to an end, but the end is the philosophy. And so, look, you go to any satsang where people are talking about stuff, they often call it Kashmir Shaivism. It's incredibly heady. And that's kind of nice too. There's a hit to that. But yeah, it's anemic, if I can use any word for it. So nothing happens. They talk about Shiva and they talk about Vimarsha Shakti and they can understand all the 36 tattvas, all they want. And they can do all this kind of intellectual work, but I mean, where is it really showing in their lives? Whereas in the traditions, as we see them practiced in Chidambaram, as we see them practiced in Kerala and Bengal, if there is philosophy, and sometimes sadly there isn't, I actually do really like the philosophy too, but if there is philosophy, interestingly, it's almost always in service of ritual. It's very telling to me that some of the greatest philosophers of our tradition, the most cerebral and intellectually refined philosophers of our tradition, who many like people in this day and age, especially in the West, are studying, like Abhinavagupta, like Shema Raja, like Jayarata, they were all ritualists. They were all master ritualists. That's the thing about Abhinava that we forget, is that he had mastered the rituals of his tradition. And it's interesting, a lot of his metaphors, a lot of his reasoning, a lot of his logic, you can see are directly coming from his ritual proficiency. So it's almost like this, like if you want to access Tantra in any way, shape, or form, especially philosophically, conceptually, you have to ground yourself in the rituals in which those philosophies emerge. So one Shaiva Acharya said it so well. He said, how can you understand these things when you've never stepped in mandala? He was saying a lot of like scholars, especially in the West, and again, that's fine if they are scholars. Like that's interesting. If somebody is a scholar and is approaching things academically, there is no expectation whatsoever that they engage with the ritual tradition. In fact, it's better that they don't. According to the Western Academy, a more objective, sort of impersonal, distant survey would be better. Like, don't actually become a part of the tribe. Like, here's, oh my God, look at this fella. You can hang out with the tribe. It's the same picture, actually. The two of you look exactly like. You can hang out with the tribe, but you can take notes, you can observe the tribe, but you cannot be in the tribe, right? Like, and if you do, you would compromise your academic integrity. So for a long time, Western scholars, and this is very important, Western scholars were sincerely studying our traditions, and that's a good thing, and they should do that. And of course, you can think of someone like Arthur Avalon. That's like a wholly different case. That fellow was Indian through and through in the sense that it wasn't an academic interest for him. He was truly deeply embedded in the tradition and its rituals. That's why I think Arthur Avalon or Sir John Woodruff's work is so important, because it's in dialogue with the tradition in a way that so much work isn't. In any case, there's this tradition in the Western academia of studying Indic sources like Tantras, Agamas, etc., and producing really high quality academic literature on it, no doubt. But nowadays, I think it's very easy to cross over into internet guru. It's like kind of easy. It's like when you're an academic and you have many ideas from your understanding of Sanskrit and from your like, I'm not pointing anybody out here. I think everyone's great. Everyone's doing their best and everyone is adding something. His mother alone is pouring through them. But the point I want to make is this. It's very tempting to sell information because information is, of course, the most commodified thing. It's easy to go on Instagram and say, here's some cool Kashmir Shaiva stuff. And you know what? It will sell because it's fucking awesome. The philosophies are so refined that it's like almost like a Promethean fire. You can't resist the depth of these philosophies. Their explanatory power is unbelievable, especially if you've ever done psychedelics even once in your life. Like you just can't deny that this is just it. Like this is just the view of reality. Like one of my favorite moments, I feel like I should have paid this guy to do this. I was in here doing a puja. I just finished the puja. I was doing a satsang. And this guy bursts into the room, a friend of mine actually. He like bursts into the room and he runs and he comes in and he's like, "You are right about everything. I just did DMT and I am Shiva and this entire thing is for no other reason than for me to enjoy my infinitude as Shiva." And he was just like going on and on and on about how everything he has ever heard in this space regarding the ultimate nature of reality is like correct, and he's experientially verified that. And I'm like, can you do this more often? Can you do this every week? Just like every week, just like break into this house and be like, "You're right, Nish, you're right about everything." I'm like, I can use this kind of energy in my life. Okay. So, because the tradition gives you the view of reality, and that view of reality is perhaps the most inclusive, most maximalist, most intuitively true, and most verifiable, because like any sincere person trying psychedelics might sooner or later come to these same conclusions. So that's the appeal. You can study Advaita Vedanta, it'll disappoint you along the way. I think a lot of people feel that. They study Advaita Vedanta and then they're like, it's great, but there's like a little bit that it's missing, maybe. I don't know, not for everyone. Or they study like various forms of Buddhism, classical Buddhism, they study Tantric Buddhism, and they're looking for something that they might find in this philosophy. And like just checks out and like it empowers all those things. So when they have this philosophy, the kind of non-dual kaula trika, anuttara trika view of the world, when they get the view, the darshan, the samyak drishti, if you will, like that view is so nourishing and so validating, and it includes every other level of the tradition, as it were. So it's appealing, the tradition and its philosophies are very powerful and very appealing, and they're worth learning even without a ritual context. But it can be misleading because you think that when you get the darshana, when you get the view, that's enough. And it might be for some very rare practitioners that it might very well be the case that all they need is to hear the view and then they're done. But often the very people who we are studying in order to get the view themselves were deeply rooted in ritual. So we want what they had, but we don't want to do the things that they did. Or we want to embody their wisdom, but we don't want to actually be embodied. It's very interesting. And I think there's a kind of hypocrisy here in the tradition where it's presented philosophically, but then when it comes time to actually learn the Sanskrit and do the rituals, and when it comes time to actually light the lamps and flow and move and dance and be possessed, they get a bit uncomfortable, you know. It's a very interesting thing, but we have to be aware of this because when we study Tantra, our first obligation, arguably, and this is how we were taught it growing up. It's like this is handed to us first before the philosophies. But I think it's better to do things the other way around these days, because the only reason why you would be inspired to like go through the tedium of learning rituals is when you are inspired with the philosophy, which is why I think Abhinavagupta presents a top-down approach. He presents the philosophies first. In any case, I think our first responsibility as tantrikas, as participants of this tradition, is to verse ourselves in the ritual modalities of this tradition. So like learning ritual, meaning learning the kriyas, the actions, accompanied by the mantras, the sacred sounds, accompanied by the jnana, the knowledge of those actions. This is what we have to do, above all. Kulnath, the Lord of the Kaula, is saying the same thing. Good to see you, Jay. I'll see you in San Francisco soon. I'm very excited. But yes, thank you for the amen. Because you're right. Like, if Kulnath is saying it, then we're right. Okay? He's the Natha, the Lord of the Kaula. Shiva, a name for Shiva. And it's like that's what Shiva teaches us. He teaches us rituals. And it's arguably because rituals do something. They're very dramatically able to do things within and without, because they work on a deeper symbolic psychological level. They work with the subconscious, not necessarily with the conscious, to use more modern Jungian phrases. So the thing about like the conscious stuff is you can study all the philosophy you want, but it won't necessarily rewire the way you experience life. So you have the same traumas, the same hang-ups, and you're like, but wait, I thought I was Shiva, but here I am as Shiva experiencing the most like contracted jiva toa experience I could possibly experience. Because the knowledge that I am Shiva cannot just be on the conscious mind. It must be a deeply embodied understanding, which is very different actually in texture than just what is held on the mind. So that being said, the ritual is the way to address this, to have a deep embodied structure. The final point then in ritual is this bhava. So we have kriya, action, we have mantra, the sacred formula, the word, we have the jnana, the knowledge of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But the fourth thing is arguably to me the most important. It's the juice of the whole puja. It's bhava. Bhava means mood. It's a very difficult word to translate, but it means like something emotional. There's an emotive force to it. But it also has the connotation of aesthetic. And this is where I think aesthetics become very important because it's tempting to make aesthetics seem superficial. Like, oh, somebody has a goth aesthetic and they like Kali. Oh, that's superficial. Kali's goth, they want to be goth, so that's why they like Kali. I don't know. I think I would pay attention to why you have a fascination for goth aesthetics. And, Rakta Rupini can probably point it out in a chart and show you why, like what placements you have that would make you suited for that kind of aesthetic. But when you have that aesthetic, then it makes sense to do a kind of spiritual practice that matches that. A lot of people might say that like, oh, it's just aesthetics are just like superficial. I think they're important clues. And bhava has the connotation almost of aesthetic. There's a sort of vibe. So I think the word vibe is very good for bhava. It's mood, it's emotion, it's feeling, but it's also vibe. And like this is where I think this lecture is all is focused. Kali is a bhava, but it's a specific bhava. And now the point I want to make is that bhava is highly variable, but more or less you can kind of feel Kali. When you feel Kali, you feel Kali. And also, like we were discussing this past week, you also feel that same energy in other deities from different traditions who also represent somewhat of the same bhava. Without glibly overgeneralizing, we could say like in the West African diaspora traditions, there might be certain deities associated to cremation grounds or to crossroads that bear a striking resemblance to the Bhairava Kali kind of ethos. You might say in other traditions, you might get like a form of Santa Muerte, which might appeal to certain people that in the same way that Kali appeals. Same people that would be like interested in Santa Muerte might be interested in Kali. Like that overlap is there. Or you could say in a more Hellenistic context, you have like a Lilith or a sort of Hecate sense for things. But like whatever the deity might be, you can see that there's a bhava associated to those deities. And therefore the practices that fall within that bhava tend to be the same. So although the jnana, the knowledge or the conceptual structures might differ, although the kriyas, the actions might differ, and certainly the mantras are going to differ. You're not going to find Sanskrit mantras in like a hoodoo setting, like obviously there are going to be different mantras, but that's not where it is. I don't think it's where it's at. Like mantras are important, kriyas are important. They can vary. Bhava though seems to be kind of universal, right? Like I think wherever you go in the world, there's some bhavas that you might find like kind of archetypically repeating themselves. Although the kriyas are going to be different, the mantras are going to be different. So having said all of that, the bhava of Mother Kali is what I want to like zero in on. Yeah, and I think that's important. Like we're drawn to Kali, and yeah, Purva is saying once you get off the ferry for Dakshineshwar, you like feel it immediately, right? Like you just like immediately sense that there's something in the air. But now I'll make another point. While it is true that the bhavas are more or less are typically universally present in all the various traditions, though the kriyas and mantras and vidyas might differ, it is a fact, though, that within the bhava of Mother Kali, it's highly variable also. And that brings me to another point. The murti that you worship has its own distinctive, unique bhava. That's why within the Kali world, there's a tradition of naming the murti. So in our house, it's Ma Siddheshwari. And when you come here and you meet Siddheshwari, she's very palpably there, I think. She's very present. But her feeling, her mood, her interaction is different than, let's say, Ma Bhavatarani at Dakshineshwar, or let's say Ma Dakshineshwari at the Kali Mandir in Laguna Beach. And like, I think the Hollywood Kali Puja is one of the best indications of this because every year we have a different murti. Every year, for the past 18 years, Uma Sanasrayan has been making murtis. And she told me yesterday, like we were talking about this, and she said like everyone is different. And I was asking, why do you think that is? You're the same person making the murti. I mean, of course, you're growing in your sadhana, so as you grow, obviously, like you as an artist, you change, and then the murti that you make is going to change, and maybe Kali is responding to that. But it's the same priest, my guru, who does the same prana pratishta, same mantras, same pujari, same artist, same clay, and more or less the image looks kind of like the image from last year with a few differences. Like, why is it that the same murti with the same, like, figurative and symbolic presentation, worshipped by the same pujari, made by the same image maker, is so variable from year to year. She's so different. There was one year where like toys mysteriously started appearing at the workshop, at the steps leading up to the workshop. These like little toys started appearing out of nowhere, and mysteriously, like they couldn't figure out who was bringing the toys. Also, the place was locked, and then not Uma, I think Geeta Prana or somebody went in and saw that there were toys in the workshop, the locked workshop where there weren't toys before. Suddenly there were toys like Hot Wheel cars, like little like teddy bears and like kind of gender non-binary kind of toys. Ma wasn't just like getting Barbies and stuff. She like liked everything, Hot Wheels, etc. So that got out. People realized that there was a mystery with this Kali where toys would appear. So people just started bringing toys to this Kali because they realized she liked toys. So it wasn't long until this Kali, this particular Kali, this one year was surrounded by toys. And the Swami that year was like, absolutely not. You cannot bring these toys into the shrine for the worship. Like, I will not worship this Kali surrounded by all this junk. Like, this all this random assortment of toys. You cannot bring the toys into the shrine. Now, the nuns, the ones who had made the Kali, felt like this was not appropriate. Like, how can we take toys away from Kali? Like, she herself manifested these toys. People brought these toys and laid it up at her feet. And now we just have to get rid of all these toys, which they're a miracle. What? Like, we're gonna bring Kali into the shrine without her toys? So they hatched on a plan. They devised a scheme. They gave her a big sari, a woman's sari, which is, we usually give a child sari because she's like, smaller. But we gave her a woman's sari that year. I wasn't there. This was way before my time. And they put all the toys under the sari. So when they brought it to the shrine, the toys were snuck in. The Swami was not at all aware that the toys were there. And mother was worshipped with the toys. So that Kali is like toy Kali. Isn't that interesting? So every year, the Hollywood Kali Puja tradition is interesting because every year there's a different Kali, and Uma has a catalog of them, and you can see all the different ones in the archives. You have pictures of all these different Kalis, and they all have a different vibe. They all have a different mood. For instance, this one we just went to immerse her. She wouldn't go. Like I've never seen this before. Like usually, like she plunges in very quickly, but this time she just kept floating and floating and floating. Of course, there are like material reasons for why, because this is the first year that we just did it traditionally with straw. Uma didn't use the metal armature, so that's one reason. But I mean, like I think these things matter. These kalis, putting aside all material concerns, they have a flavor, a bhava. So I think we'll start. I want to like just close with this idea that like Kali is a bhava, and there are certain things about Kali Puja that create that bhava, like the ghosts, like the jackals, like the presence of cremation grounds and panchamakaras, like the Shava sadhana and the Panchamundi sadhana, like the worship of Dakinis and Yoginis and the possession culture, the emphasis on power and the emphasis on curse work, like the waning moon and inauspicious things, like all of these things give Kali her flavor, her bhava. And if you're attracted to these things, that means we're resonating on some level with that Mahakala, Mahakali kind of bhava. But that being said, the degree to which that will manifest is going to be different in each household, with each practitioner, with each murti of Mother Kali, which brings me to a very important point. The central item for worship, for engaging in Tantra, is the murti or the vigraha. And there are four versions of this, arguably four, if not five. One is a two-dimensional picture. That's sufficient. If you have a picture of Mother Kali, her bhava has already come into your house. And people are very superstitious about even this. They're like, if you bring a picture of Mother Kali into your house, that's going to be inauspicious for you because now your house is a cremation ground. She likes cremation grounds. So if you bring her into your house, don't you think she's going to turn your house into a cremation ground? Won't you kill all your family and like burn your house down? And I know people who like very soon after bringing Kali into their home, their house like burnt down and they attribute it to Mother Kali. And I'm like, bros, like, I don't know if she's to blame for that. But if she is, then she's to blame for everything. Because she is, I mean, there's not like any specific thing that she does and specifically. Anyway, I don't need to get into this evaluation of superstitions around Mother Kali. But it is interesting to note that people are afraid to bring even a picture into their house because they understand, I think this is true, they understand that that would be establishing a formal connection with Mother Kali. So you might start there. You might bring the picture into your home. And if you look at that picture, you'll see all the elements that I just described. There's probably a cremation ground. There are probably jackals. There are probably skulls and other mortuary symbols. There's violence and arousal and madness and intoxication. All of that is there in the picture. And of course, if you are like a civilized person in urban society trying to live a decent, grounded life, none of these things are going to be very helpful for you to think about. They're disturbing. That's why if you're in the bath and you're singing witchy songs, you'll scare your significant others and things like that. Because who wants to bring that energy into the household of death and like darkness, etc. So the image is one thing, but the next thing is arguably the murti, like the three-dimensional image. That's usually when things change. Like when the Murti comes in, that's like an actual vehicle that Mother Kali is more able to use to manifest her energies more palpably. So you think of the Murti as like an Annabelle type situation where you give a doll for a spirit to possess. Like that, similar to that. The Murti is something that she's more able to possess. And a bigger Murti means more presence, arguably. So there's I know it's how you use it, but here like size does matter a little bit. And of course, if it's very big, you might be very intimidated. I mean, Hollywood Kali is a really interesting example. Umama is worshipping Hollywood Kali. She was only supposed to paint it. Somebody purchased an image, a beautiful image of Mother Kali, and asked her to paint it because she's an image maker, she's an artist. She painted it beautifully with fangs and like wonderful. Then she sent the Murti back to the owner, and the owner just couldn't handle it. Sent it back to Uma. I was like, I can't worship this Murti. And it had to do with her size, but it also had to do with her bhava. When I was puja sitting, I guess, for Uma when she was traveling. My God, you think I'm sleepless now? You should see how I am with Hollywood Kali. That bitch is crazy. Like Hollywood Kali keeps you up all night because she's like so excited. Her name is literally Hollywood Kali, and she's worshipped there in Atwater Village in Hollywood. But she's a crazy woman, like more so than Siddheshwari. Like she's just so up, and that's distinct. That's like distinctly present in Hollywood Kali. And it's funny because I mean that person immediately felt that after Uma painted Hollywood Kali, she came alive in a way that she didn't wasn't before. And when she went into that person's home, they felt like they were out of their depth, and they sent it back to Uma, where now and now that's where she resides in Uma's shed, and she's amazing. I hope one day you'll all get a chance to see Hollywood Kali, meet her. She's so cool. But I can say that because she's a distinctive personality. Although it's the same Kali, no? I'm talking about Kali, and yet Hollywood Kali is a distinct appearance of Kali. So it's like, the Lady of Fatima might be different a little bit from the Lady of Guadalupe, it might be different a little bit from Our Lady of Lourdes. Like each lady, each apparition of Mary has its own flavor, its own bhava, confers its own siddhi, as it were. Why would the mother do this? Because though she is one, she delights in diversity. Though she is one, she has an infinite sari collection. Like my grandmother, the rest of my family threatens my grandmother that if she doesn't give away all her saris, she's going to be cremated in them because she just has an impossible number of saris. Like they're in the thousands. Thousands and thousands and thousands of like fine saris, and she's like obsessed with saris. There's so many of them. But when my Malayali grandmother, who very much has a Kali bhava, seeing her with all her saris reminds me why Kali has so many forms. She just likes wearing different saris and like showing up to the event in different ways. She delights in reinventing herself. David Bowie, who? Mother Kali is so diversified. And so, therefore, when you bring a murti into your home, you should be prepared, as it were, to encounter Kali in a unique way. Although you're familiar with the bhava, you're familiar with Kali in like the general sense, ideally you are, maybe you're not, but to be equated with Kali in the general sense is one thing, but then to have her in your home in a murti, like then you realize there's something even more distinctive about Kali Puja, that each Kali is distinct even within the very distinctive cremation ground world of spirits that is Kali's world, because we have that. So the each murti is different, and I think that might have to do with grace. It has to do with the kind of worshiper that you are, and as you change, it might change too. The murti might manifest differently based on you, but you also might change as the murti decides for you to. So like in my case, I'm very orthodox by nature in the sense that like I care a lot about tradition, and I guess not. I guess I'm not orthodox by nature, but I was trying to be, as it were. I was trying to be respectable. But then I brought Mother Kali into my home, and she would have none of it. So it was so clear every time I would try to be sattvic or do things in a way that I thought were more right hand. Like she would foil every one of my plans and insist upon a particular mode of worship that I was powerless to resist. Now I'm finally realizing how much more authentic it is to my being and how much more helpful it is in my sadhana to embrace those things that I formerly rejected. But she wasn't going to let it go. She wasn't going to let me just be what I wasn't. And therefore, the kind of Kali that I brought into my home was distinctly and uniquely sensitive to the kind of worshipper she was going to have, the kind of pujari who would engage in her worship. So Masideshwari is Masideshwari. Ain't nothing like it. She's her own being, her own person. And that's true for every murti. So that's the first thing. The murti will determine a lot the distinctive features of Kali Puja. And I guess it'll be like this. The different murtis will put you somewhere on the spectrum in a different way, whether it's closer to the left or closer to the right, or even just like maybe it's not even on that spectrum. It's just the kind of puja that you do, including the kinds of offerings that you give. Are you going to substitute the Panchamakars, or are you just going to offer her meat? You know, are you going to do an animal sacrifice, or are you going to do a bali like with a cucumber? Are you going to worship her at night? I mean, that's important too, at night or in the daytime. You get a different effect worshiping Kali at night. So, for instance, in our household, I can't start Kali Puja until at least 10 or 11 p.m. because that's just the way she likes it here. She keeps me up all night because that's when her energies arguably are so palpably felt in this household. Whereas in other households, she might be on a different schedule and she might not mind that as per the needs of the worshiper. So, having said all of that, I think that's another thing that makes Kali Puja very distinctive. Your murti is your murti, and your puja is your puja, and that's going to be so unique to you, even within the very unique bhava that is Mother Kali. Okay, I was gonna go to the Padati and maybe look at a few different mantras. I don't know if you have time for that, but I was thinking maybe we could just open for some Q&A for a little bit. I think I'm kind of done. I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. So like your step one would be to go to acquire a murti, and then promptly begin your ritual journey in the world of Mother Kali, to begin establishing a relationship with her, to distinctly enter into the bhava of Mother Kali. And don't be afraid to lean into it too, because part of that leaning into the bhava might require like changing one's dress, preferring certain colors over other colors, being awake at certain times as opposed to other times, going to certain places and spending significant amounts of time there, gravitating towards different kinds of music and different kinds of media, different kinds of company, eating different kinds of food, like how much my diet has changed as a result of Kali sadhana. These are all aspects of the bhava. And I think when Halloween comes around, that's interesting because when you put on a costume, ideally you should play the part, no? Like if you're dressed like a particular character from a particular movie, but you're not acting that part, you're like really even embodying the costume. And you could say like the whole thing is a sacred drama. When you're worshiping Mother Kali, you're entering a script. You're entering a stage who's set and setting her a certain way. And you can't just show up like, and be oblivious to that bhava. So to resonate with that bhava, of course, the Kapalikas, they would carry their skull bowls and they would wear their skull ornaments and they would sit in the smashan and they would have their hair wild and free. They would sit naked sometimes. They would wear certain kinds of clothes. They would worship and consume certain kinds of substances. All of that is a kind of method acting. It's a kind of sacred drama in order to, in one's own dress and thought, resemble the deity that one is worshipping. It's again not even from a non-dual point of view that this is done. It's a purely dualistic idea that there is a deity, her name is Kali, and she looks like this. So therefore, I should also look like that because that's gonna make it more likely that we vibe with one another. And interestingly enough, if you're already coming to Kali, you're already vibing with Kali, you probably already have those aesthetic sentiments as well. So I think that's one thing that we do when we bring Kali into our home. We recognize what's unique about our Kali and we respond accordingly, which could have effects on the way that we dress, on the way that we eat, on the way that we present ourselves, on the people that we meet, in the places that we hang out in, etc., etc. So that would be Kali Puja. Isn't it exciting? It's just that's what I wanted to convey. Above all, I wanted to convey that Kali is a particular bhava, and that bhava is not to be understood by the intellectual, conceptual mind. It cannot be understood in that way. It can only be experienced, and that experience is easily available when we take the time to access it through puja. So puja, the ritual modality of puja, the revival of shamanic traditions developed through the Vedas, that puja is meant to put you in touch palpably and tangibly and reliably and meaningfully with the energy and bhava of Mother Kali. And once you touch it, like once you feel Mother Kali in any way, shape, or form, in a tangible way, she won't let go in one sense. So that's the warning. Buyer be warned. Rudira Priya told me that since she got home, she hasn't been able to stop thinking of Mother Kali. Like there's a kind of obsession that comes, or you feel her presence. Once you felt her once, like in the context of puja, you feel her presence from that point on. Hopefully that inspires us to do puja because that's when we realize, oh, this shit slaps. It's real. Like it works. Like something about these modalities, the mantras, the words, the movements, the thoughts, the bhava, it brings God face to face with us in the room in the form of the murti. So it's significant that Sri Ramakrishna began his journey with puja. His first question was, does God exist? And if so, is she there in the image? And to answer that question, which is a very skeptical scientific inquiry into the ultimate nature of reality, he plunged into puja. It's interesting. Puja was an experiment to him. He was trying to figure out whether or not this was real. And so he did puja. And through sincerely practicing puja, he was able to verify the existence of Mother Kali and feel her and experience her directly. And that was his beginning. That was how he got his start. And notice he ended with the worship of his wife, Sarada Devi, on the Falaharni Kali Puja. And that was when he surrendered his mala at her lotus feet and he formally ended his sadhana, meaning he, from that point on, never did any like structured sadhana ever again. He was ecstatic. He was a madman for God from that point on. He didn't actually practice anymore. But isn't it interesting? He started with puja and he ended with puja. To me, that's tremendously significant that the avatara, the incarnation, if you think Sri Ramakrishna's incarnation, was a tantrika, was a worshipper of Mother Kali, whose entire sadhana seemed to be rooted in puja. Perhaps that almost implies, this might sound sectarian, I don't mean to say it, but perhaps ritual is the way of the Kali Yuga. Perhaps embodied, more feminine oriented, more subconscious oriented practices are the way for the Kali Yuga. And that's why when we come to the Christ force, like it's Mary that we really need to be looking at because that's the ritual tradition. That's like the priest and priestess tradition. Like Christ as priest is the reframe that we get from Ramakrishna. Not Christ as rabbi, but Christ as priest, Christ as exorcist, Christ as intermediary between the world of spirit and the world of matter. So cremation ground Jesus, something, high priestess Mary, like the context of Buddha as a ritualist is obviously not that available, because the Buddha, as you know, was stepping away from the Vedas to enter into a more Upanishadic, intellectual inquiry into the ultimate nature of reality. But notice the way that that teaching is expressed in the Mahayana world, especially, and even in the Vipassana world, honestly, in the kind of Southern Buddhist world also. You get a lot of rituals, nowhere quite as much as in the Vajrayana tradition. So thinking about like Buddhism in the most ritualistic context, I think is the most productive. Notice one of the most powerful forms of Buddhism is Vajrayana Buddhism. Like it's just like widespread. I mean, their seat, their pita is destroyed. And look, the Vajrayana Buddhist diaspora, it's like dominated the entire world, as it were. I think if you were smart, if you were a Westerner interested in Buddhism and you were smart, learn Vajrayana Buddhism. Even if you're doing Zen Buddhism, that's fine, but there's rituals there too. It's not just about reading Alan Watts and calling yourself a Zen Buddhist. That's great. That's perfectly good as a beginning. But you have to actually go to the Zendo and involve yourself in Soto and Rinzai, like ritualism. Like they do rituals too, albeit in a very minimalist way. But you have to learn how to make matcha, I guess, or like do a tea ceremony like in that way. Like, so all of that is available. And I think the Vajrayana world, the Zen world, these are ritualistic worlds. And moving forward, as you enter into spirituality in any way, shape, or form, I think the one thing we can learn from Sri Ramakrishna and from his experience of spirituality is that ritual matters. And the thing about Tantra is it's placed in your palms now, a powerful system of ritual that is tedious to learn, that is intimidating to learn, that is difficult to learn. But if you're down, I'm down. And hopefully, once you start getting that feel for it, once you contact the energies that the ritual is trying to invoke, you'll be hooked for life. And so I'm going to present ritual as like the be all end all, like the mainstay in Tantra. And if you start it, there's no end to how far you can go with it. And it is our conviction, based on what we saw in Sri Ramakrishna and based on what we see in the Tantras, and of course based on our own personal experience, it is our conviction that when we learn rituals, that itself is sufficient for the entire gamut of spiritual experience. And all japa, all dhyana, all the various practices, they exist within that ritual context, they're ennobled by ritual context, and they themselves are like means to getting more out of your ritual. So whether you're reciting mantras or meditating on Mother Kali, if you can ritualize all of this, if you can interact with it within the context of like traditional tantric ritual, which are always spontaneously, innovatively developing over the years anyway, that would be the ideal way to go about it. So Kali Puja, may we all do it. or at least those who want Mother Kali, may we all, like, I'm like looking for a good like closing punchline. I'm like, I want like a dramatic mic drop closing punchline. I'm just like, you know what, that's all I got. That's it for now. There isn't any more. See you next time. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanam Astu. Asit ji and Dr. Rupini were giving me shit one time because I gave a 45-minute lecture in one place, and then at a cafe, Asit took me aside and said, we realized that you're capable of giving 45-minute lectures. And I'm like, Baba, that's because I was supposed to talk about Hanuman. I don't know anything. I had no material. Like, what on earth am I going to... That's why... I'm like in a Vaishnava space and we're talking about Vaishnavism. I'm like, I don't know. And I just derailed the whole talk. I was like, well, Hanuman has 5 heads. Panchamukhi Hanuman. You know who else has 5 heads? Shiva. Let's talk about the Tantras now and the 4 Vedas and the 5 Vayus. So that's why it was 45 minutes. Anyway, Jayama. Yeah, exactly.